The CNA Summit 2026. In a world racing toward the next frontier of opportunity, smart growth matters more than ever. Join global and regional leaders as they examine how investment and innovation drive long-term competitiveness in one of the world's most dynamic markets. Gain a high-level look at how Indonesia attracts quality capital and converts it into sustainable advantage across the archipelago. Discover where global capital is moving, what builds investor confidence, and how organizations turn strategic investment into real impact through the execution lessons shaping Indonesia and the region. The CNA Summit 2026, coming to Jakarta for the very first time on 5th February. Brought to you by MediaCorp. Main partner, Singtel. Hello Possibility.
It's not just a signal, it's your connection, plugging you into the safest, smartest city in the world. Whatever your new challenge, you are unstoppable with Singtel 5G Plus. You can keep pace, or you can set it. Race ahead with a new standard of connectivity and security. Whatever dream you're chasing, you are unstoppable with Singtel 5G Plus.
Good morning and selamat pagi from Jakarta, Indonesia. That's where we are at the CNA Summit 2026. The theme is Smart Growth, Navigating Investment and Innovation in a New Era. My name is Yasmin Yonkers. I present on Asia First and Asia Now on CNA. And this is my colleague Erickson.
I'm Erickson. I'm editor with CNA.id, CNA's Bahasa Indonesia website, bringing regional stories into sharp focus for Indonesia and beyond. Good to have you join us this Thursday morning on our YouTube live stream. We are broadcasting this from the Ritz-Carlton, Jakarta Pacific Place.
Now, this is a very glamorous building, isn't it?
Indeed, it's one of the most luxurious hotels in Jakarta.
It is. So, Erickson, you are from Indonesia. Tell us, for a local Jakartan, what does the Pacific Place and the Ritz-Carlton mean? Like you say it's luxurious, but do you come here often?
Actually not. I'm originally from Medan, Pematang Siantar, but every time I come to Jakarta, then I will spend my time to this sports shopping mall, buying things that I wanted to buy that
really
we don't really find it in Singapore.
Okay, so Erickson's actually based in Singapore and he works on the ID website, and we're very, very happy to be here today for many, many reasons. It is the first time that the CNA Summit is being held in Jakarta outside of Singapore.
And also the first time we are doing this with two hosts.
Which means we get more perspectives, which means hopefully a more dynamic conversation throughout the morning.
We are really glad you all could join us in this very wonderful, lovely morning. Today we are unpacking what smart growth really means in this new era of investment and innovation in Indonesia.
So growth really today isn't just about the headlines, it isn't just about how much capital comes in, it is about how investment turns into delivery, how technology and even AI are being used to build advantage, to manage risk and to scale responsibly, and whether growth is resilient, trusted and felt across the economy.
So we're bringing together perspectives and real-world examples, because that was the most important thing. From the boardrooms and investment decisions to everyday businesses and communities in Indonesia, to explore how leaders navigate these choices and turn ambitions into the real results.
So I'll tell you who's going to be on stage today and who's going to be, among those in the audience. Notable policymakers and business leaders joining us at the CNA Summit here in Jakarta, including Pak Roeslani, who is Minister of Investment and Downstream Industry. He's also the chairman of BKPM Indonesia, CEO of Danantara Indonesia, and many, many more. Right now, we go to YouTube Live. We're going to also be sharing clips from CNA's documentaries and bulletins. We're looking at smart growth, what it really means in practice. We're also going to go to a couple of guests in a moment. Tell us about the next video we're going to watch.
Yeah, we will start with one of the most significant investment stories in the region, in my country, Indonesia. Indonesian nickel industry has grown dramatically in a tremendous speed in just a few years, and it is now central to the global electric vehicle supply chain. So this isn't just about mining resources, but it's also about building integrated downstream ecosystem. So we will show you a clip from the China and Global South to look at how this strategy has been taking shape in Indonesia.
10 years ago, I think from all this nickel product, including the stainless steel, I think it's only like $2 billion. Now, I think last year we are about 34 billion US dollar. And with all this ongoing project that we have today, I'm quite confident maybe it is going to be about 40 to 45 billion in the next 3 to 4 years.
Nickel refining has created many jobs in Indonesia. But Indonesia aims to export much more than just refined nickel. It wants to supply batteries and eventually EVs. It's part of an economic development policy known as downstreaming, a critical pillar of President Prabowo's plans for the country.
The terminology of downstreaming is we would like to create more value added. So how you create that is actually you build an ecosystem of industry that actually connected each minerals that we have in Indonesia. So when you are talking about this downstreaming, we are not only talking about, nickel downstream, we are not only talk about the aluminum, we are not only talk about the copper, but how actually you can create the ecosystem for all these critical mineral so that your product can compete better in the international market. I think to create a lithium battery, you cannot only rely on nickel. You need lithium, you need cobalt, you need copper, you need aluminum. And Indonesia have almost all of it except the lithium. So that's why I think the idea to create this ecosystem is very feasible.
Just as China has been the main partner in building Indonesia's nickel sector, it is again the front-runner in Indonesia's downstreaming dreams. China's BTR New Material Group and Singapore's Stellar Investment jointly invested $478 million to build a plant in Indonesia producing battery materials. The plant opened in August 2024. Another $299 million has since been committed in a second phase of investments. China's battery giant CATL has partnered an Indonesian firm to invest up to $1.2 billion in a battery cell manufacturing plant. PT Vale and Chinese battery metal producer Gemco are building a $1.42 billion plant to process nickel ore. And further downstream, Chinese electric car manufacturer GAC Aeon is set to open its factory in Indonesia in 2025, targeting an initial capacity of 100,000 units per year. China EV giant BYD also announced plans to invest $1.3 billion to build an EV plant in Indonesia. The factory is expected to commence operations at the end of 2025. The biggest investment announcement came from Chinese battery material maker CNGR Advanced Material Company, who said it is planning to build an integrated production facility in Indonesia worth $10 billion.
China and the Global South, an excerpt from that, which you can catch at our CNA YouTube page. So, Ericsson, as you can see, the scale is impressive, but capital inflows that are large don't always translate into smooth execution.
Exactly, because many projects in Indonesia, it can attract a very strong interest, but the main classic problem that we still have is about the delivery. Many companies struggling about the delivery.
Okay, so let's go a little bit closer into that. Joining us now is the chairman of Indonesia's Smart City Provider Association and president of EV Ready, Rain Rinaldi, who works directly on turning investment interest into projects that actually deliver results. Welcome to the CNA Summit in Jakarta. Thank you for being with us.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Yasmin. Good morning, Eric.
Yeah.
Yes.
What was it like coming here in your EV? I assume it was an EV.
Yeah, basically we are one of the most comprehensive EV company here because we have the big things like LRT, and then we also doing the conversion initiative, which is we convert from the conventional vehicle to the electric vehicle. Okay, we changed the machine.
Yeah, well, that's a big project. Obviously,
Right.
It goes on a big scale, Rain. So Indonesia attracts investor attention across all sectors, including yours. From your experience, tell us what usually determines whether that interest actually turns into projects that deliver on cost, on performance, and everything else.
Okay, so basically, all investor can be dealing with the risk on every investment in Indonesia, but the one that they always ask is about the commitment, the government commitment, and then also the regulation commitment, and especially like for the EV sector. When the investor coming, like me and my group also, when we deploy the project EV in Indonesia, the one that we are looking for is the commitment from the government for support from the shifting from the, let's say, from the conventional to the electrified. Because as you know that Indonesia already signed the agreement on the G20 for the Net Zero Summit, and then this is the things that we are looking for. Because basically, as an investor, we can dealing with the risk as long as it's manageable. And then the one that we are really chase is a big and support commitment for the government.
I see. So in your field, you mentioned a lot about the government. Of course, the government has also opened new factories. I think the recent one is with the Vietnamese electric car. Do you think that the government commitment is really strong, or they are still half-hearted? Because recently the Minister Aileen Goh, he said that they will stop the subsidy for the electric car for this year. I think this is a very, very big topic. Everyone is concerned, whether the government will put less emphasis on the electric car. So there is a concern whether people will start to go back again to the manual one.
Yeah, basically, Indonesia government is already support us, and then they are commit to support the investment on the electric vehicle. And then, but the things is, as we know that Indonesia is one of the most, maybe one of the most country with the largest number of the vehicle is 178 million.
That is impressive, yes.
And then, but Indonesia doesn't have any culture to throw away their old car, old motorbike.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's a big trouble. Okay, when we are doing shifting, that's why, just like you said, the subsidy is really important for us because it can be move people to try to shifting to the electric vehicle. That's a big thing. That's why, and then also if the subsidy is, let's say, we do with big things at one time, it can save more money for the oil subsidy, something like that.
Okay. Got it.
All right. Definitely you're involved in the EV ecosystem, as we've mentioned, and we introduced you as that. What lessons, Rain, from building EV projects should Indonesia apply to other sectors so that digital innovation strengthens competitiveness instead of adding to make things more complex and complicated?
Sure. Okay. In Indonesia, there is a three stage. Okay, for the let's say because we are talking about the EV, we call the smart vehicle. Okay, because we also have the initiative to building some autonomous car, and then at this pace, the first thing is to do electrified first. Electrified means from the normal vehicle to electric vehicle. After that, electric vehicle is easier to digitalize. Okay, we can connect with the, let's say, with we can put the blockchain technology into the vehicle. We can also put the IoT things, and then we can doing many things after we are doing electrified the vehicle. That's why after that we will enter the smart vehicle era. Okay, that's the things that we are right now try to force in Indonesia.
And other industries that can learn from yours in the way that you implemented things?
Sure.
What would be the big takeaway for you, Rain?
So, currently in Indonesia, of course, for the blockchain industry is a big thing here, because currently Indonesia is one of the biggest adoption for the blockchain, and then also AI, because we are focused on the AI-nomic, on the, as we can see, the government also already said it's AI-nomic or the intelligent economy. And then this is the new industry for the digital era, and then that we can do in Indonesia.
Yeah, that's really great to hear about the word digital. You know, it's like a magic words nowadays. Many companies say they are going digital, but from your perspective as an investor and operator, what kinds of digital changes actually improve operations, and which one tend to look good, you know, on the slides, but actually they fail to move to the business?
Okay. Most likely, when they're saying that we are going digital or something like that, but they are just move or have something that like application or website or something. I mean, like it's looks good, but it's not really good, because we are focused on the digital era. We are focused on automation. Okay, especially because currently many companies already adopt the AI. Which is, it will be easier because AI currently help us to do the most painful things in the business process. Okay, this is the one that they have to focus. Okay, and then maybe 10 years ago, when some company have some way, we have our own application, it's a good thing. Okay, but right now, no, because right now everything should be more efficient, and then should be adapt more like AI on the business process.
So you believe the AI will be very critical for the...
Super believe.
Okay, that's great.
I can see that, the passion in what you're saying. Thank you, Rain Rinaldi from EV Ready. Appreciate your time here, and enjoy the rest of the CNA Summit.
Sure, thank you, Yasmin.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rain.
So one question that keeps coming up, though, is who is really driving this next wave of investment? And this is, of course, in Indonesia's push into downstreaming. China has emerged as a major power.
And it is an issue that investors and policymakers are watching very, very closely, especially as Indonesia's signal is open to partnership well beyond any single country. Let's take a closer look at the debate.
Indonesia's leaders have consistently spoken about strategic balancing in its foreign policy. But when we look at the downstreaming efforts, a lot of it seems to be dominated by Chinese companies. Why is that?
If you see the whole value chain of this lithium battery and the electric vehicle, I would say China have the most advanced and efficient technology. If you see top 10 lithium battery companies, you see many Chinese companies, you see 3 South Korean companies, you see maybe 1 or 2 Japanese companies. But you will not find any US or European company inside the list. It is what it is today. One thing that we can make sure is, we have a commitment for international cooperation. I think it's very important, the commitment from Indonesia is that we want our product to be freely sold to any countries. So it's not only to China, it's not only to Japan, South Korea, US, Europe. As long as this is beneficial for both countries, we are very open. Yes, at the beginning, a lot of the Chinese company, but now I think you see that a US company is investing, Ford is investing in Indonesia, South Korean company is investing in Indonesia. Still, even that, they still have a joint venture with the Chinese.
China's strategy, Pearl, is that it would like to make other countries dependent upon them economically. At the same time, China would like to establish military dominance over them. And this combination of economic dependence and military dominance, they believe, should compel other countries to become more accommodating or less confrontational towards China and its long-term goals and interests. And we all know that one of China's long-term goals is to consolidate control over its claimed territories along its periphery. And this is going to, run up against many countries.
Actually, Tian Chong, feel free to bring in
pretty much every direction. And Indonesia would, of course, be one of those.
Why should China have any military ambitions against Indonesia? We have been here for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and between China and Indonesia, there have never been territorial adventures against each other. So I think to have anyone in Washington coming up with such claims of Chinese territorial ambitions or military ambitions against an important country like Indonesia is really barking at the wrong tree.
China and the Global South, another look at that CNA documentary. So what's striking, Erickson, is that across all these discussions, from EV to industry to even geopolitics, digital infrastructure is a common thread. And of course, AI is increasingly shaping how companies make investment decisions and also scale across markets.
To unpack that, we are very honored to join by the CEO of Singtel Singapore, Ng Tian Chong, who has navigated growth, technology, and trust across diverse and complex markets. Good morning, Mr. Chong.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, let's start with, before we get into the summit, which is going to start very soon, give us a sense of how AI is reshaping telco and network innovation across the ASEAN region.
Sure. That's a really good question. I think first and foremost, what comes to my mind when the question is asked is this area about scams. So the bad actors are getting increasingly sophisticated and very efficient. And so AI is helping us a lot in that area. So from a telco perspective, what I see is we are deploying AI and machine learning. And for example, in Singtel Singapore, with the help of AI, we are actually now blocking about 10 million scam calls and SMSs on the monthly basis. Now, besides that, the central area where AI is playing is helping telcos essentially to shift from a pure connectivity provider to more like an intelligent platform provider, essentially converting dumb pipes to smart pipes. And what I see is AI for telcos. The big areas we're working on are things like autonomous network, where networks are able to self-configure, self-optimize, and self-heal, so that we can take care of a problem before it even shows up, so to speak. So that's one area. Other areas where AI is helping us from a business side is hyper-personalization, where AI is able to help us work with the data that we have so that we can serve up a right offer at the right time, in the right tonality, in the right medium, in a very hyper-personalized way.
Can I ask Tian Chong, when it comes to trying to limit those scams, can AI really catch up with these scammers? Because if we are to believe, they move at a very, very quick rate, don't they?
They do. And so
their antics just get more complicated.
That's correct. I mean, the central idea is the models need to be trained. So while the bad actors are improving, we are also equally improving, right? We're training the models, and we use a combination of different things along with machine learning. So that whole combination, both sides are keeping up. It's not just one-sided.
Yeah, of course. Okay.
Yeah. How does AI drive smarter investment and sustainable growth in the telecom landscape?
The way I look at it is, with AI helps us to identify where the value is coming from the network. And as a result of that, we're able to do better capital allocation, right? So, for example, from optimizing energy usage to predicting where the demand is, AI has a very big role to play, to help us identify these things. And so that overall, I would say that with AI, we're able to shorten the innovation cycle, we're able to build stronger resiliency, and in doing so, we have a longer-term sustainable growth. That's the way I look at it.
And you at Singtel Singapore and Singtel as a group, how do you balance growth, trust, and technology in emerging markets? And we're definitely in one of them here right now in Jakarta, Indonesia.
Yes, indeed. I'm so happy to be here in Indonesia, which is one of my favorite countries. But on that topic, my view is, first of all, there's no one-size-fit-all. Even in Asia, we have different types of emerging markets, from India, Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, all the way to Indonesia. But what I've observed is an ecosystem-led approach of partnership where a company like Singtel with our global expertise combined with partners with great local insights, they work very well in order to be able to deliver that balance of growth, investing in the right set of technologies at the right time to drive long-term sustainability growth. So in Indonesia, for example, we've been here since the early 90s with Telkom to run Telkomsel, and our combination has worked very well and has successfully navigated through thick and thin, through the decades. So it's that combination. And similarly, Singtel also works with other partners across Southeast Asia, as well.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Tian Chong, for being with us here at the CNA Summit, and I hope you enjoy yourself today. Yeah, all the networking and everything.
Welcome. I look forward to the event. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate your time. All right. So, large-scale infrastructure, one side of smart growth. But it also shows up in everyday ways in how people and how business interact.
Smart growth isn't just about how much investment come in. It is about whether the growth actually translates into stability and opportunity for people on the ground, especially in Indonesia. This next clip from CNA documentary Insight will look at why Indonesia middle class is under pressure and why that matters for the long-term growth.
Even though they only make up a fifth of the population, the Indonesian middle class's contribution to the economy is massive.
Middle class dalam suatu perekonomian itu adalah ibaratnya bantalan dari perekonomian kita. Indonesia kan sekitar 54% dari PDB sisi pengeluaran itu dikontribusikan oleh konsumsi masyarakat. Karena orang yang masuk dalam kelas menengah itu, dia biasanya adalah fast spender dan big spender. Ya kan? Jadi dia sudah secure dengan hidupnya, dia akan bisa belanja banyak dan juga dia fast spender, artinya dia bisa belanja cepat begitu. Nah, itu yang kemudian bisa menciptakan multiplier effect untuk perekonomian. Kalau banyak orang yang belanja, otomatis supply harus ada. Produksi akan meningkat. Produksi meningkat, industri akan bergerak. Industri bergerak tentunya akan menciptakan lapangan pekerjaan yang baik.
And so, the shrinking middle class in Indonesia raised alarm bells. What's more, those who remained in the middle class were spending less. A recent survey of middle-class workers by market intelligence firm Inventure found that almost half of the respondents said they experienced a decline in purchasing power. 85% of the respondents blamed rising prices of essential goods, such as food, energy, and transport.
Nah, dari penerimaan pajak itu kan disumbang dari beberapa struktur masyarakat. Yang paling besar, lebih dari separuhnya, 50,7% pajak itu disumbang dari kelas menengah.
But why is the middle class shrinking? After all, Indonesia's economy has rebounded after the pandemic, exceeding 5% growth in each of the last 3 years.
Kita tetap tumbuh 5%. Itu kan sebenarnya secara standar internasional cukup baik. Tapi kenapa nggak bisa kontribusi pada penciptaan lapangan kerja yang informal? Permasalahannya adalah yang tumbuh adalah sektor-sektor yang capital intensif, seperti hilirisasi nikel itu. Itu kan dia butuh modal, sementara dia nggak terlalu membutuhkan tenaga kerja yang tinggi. Sementara sektor-sektor yang butuh tenaga kerja banyak, labor intensif seperti tekstil, footwear, alas kaki, sepatu, itu shrinking. Pertumbuhannya dan share-nya itu makin tahun itu makin rendah.
Joining us now is Julia Lau, Senior Fellow at the ICS Yusof Ishak Institute. And we will look at how growth and change are playing out in Indonesia. Good morning.
Selamat pagi.
Selamat pagi, Miss Julia. I will start with the first questions about political continuity and strategic economic policy. As Indonesia moves from the Jokowi era into the Prabowo administration, what signals matter most to the global investors when judging the continuity, reform, credibility, and risk, especially in the light of the recent moves toward the stronger local content rules, downstreaming requirements, and what we have seen as more common style economic policy from the government?
So I think we can talk about it in terms of signals, right? Whether the signals are just communication signals, and even a joke or even a comment that's offhand, but if it's said by a minister, can be interpreted different ways. Because today, we are digital and information flows very quickly. So I think what continuity people seek is the current government continuing with certain reforms? Right? Is the current government also continuing to build infrastructure the way the previous government did? So when you mention local content, I just came from a 2-day summit at a different location, and a lot of the investors are saying, we understand you need local content rules, but please don't make it a barrier for us. So I think reassurance is probably what I'll settle on in terms of what investors want. They want reassuring noises, but they also want reassuring actions from the government.
Yeah, Julia, Indonesia has no shortage of big policy announcements. We do hear them off and on and sort of wonder, how are we going to get there when it comes to execution? So from a political institutional view, where does execution then most often break down? Why don't we start with that? And then we'll talk about the investor part of it in a moment.
So again, I'm not an institutional investor, but one of the words we always hear is regulation. So it can be in the form of excessive regulation, or that it's confusing because they're overlapping regulation. So I think in both circumstances, you need clear interpretation of the law or the regulation. You also need people on the ground to understand. When I'm an investor coming in, I need speed. So if I'm too tied up in all your laws and regulations, not saying I want to break the law, but if another country can do it faster, then I may weigh my decision differently, right? Deciding whether to invest or when to invest in Indonesia.
How far away are we from having investors really understand that the plans will actually stick?
So interestingly, the day before, a couple of the ministers who addressed the Indonesia Economic Summit were asking for at least one more year. At least one more year, because the argument is in the first year, it's really not the first year. So we are in the second year, so maybe until next year, be a bit patient. And I'm not sure we have that 1 year, but I think we can try a few months and see what happens.
Okay, we have time for one more question, Erickson, because we're going to start the CNA Summit.
Sure.
So we have Julia with us for just a moment more.
Sure, we give the final great questions. Yeah, so Indonesia often project openness to investment internationally, and that's what they always say. But how closely, in your opinion, this public narrative about openness to investments align with what investors actually experience on the ground when they're entering or expanding to the market?
I think I do see that openness. There were different groups of foreign investors coming to this summit, and what may be harder for them is to find out who you need to talk to and how many people do you need to talk to before you get something done. But I think the openness is there, except again, communication sometimes needs to be clear, that you're always welcoming rather than pointing to maybe foreign elements who are disturbing politics or other things. Yeah.
All right, Julia Lau, thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the summit. It's great to have you here in Jakarta, Senior Fellow of ICEA's Yusof Ishak Institute. So in a few moments, we are going to be taking you into the ballroom here at the Ritz-Carlton in Jakarta, and we will kick off the summit. It wouldn't be possible without our partners. Just want to take a moment to thank our partners, Singtel. Thank you for making this summit possible.
It's not just a signal, it's your connection, plugging you into the safest, smartest city in the world. Whatever your new challenge, you are unstoppable with Singtel 5G Plus. You can keep pace, or you can set it. Race ahead with a new standard of connectivity and security. Whatever dream you're chasing, you are unstoppable with Singtel 5G Plus.
Jakarta, thank you so much. This is the CNA Summit, and we are going off to the ballroom, the address by the MediaCorp CEO, Tam Luk King. Let's have a listen.
I'm Erickson, your co-host.
All right. So Ms. Tom is not quite on the stage at this very moment. We're going to get to her very shortly. Erickson, this is, of course, the first CNA Summit in Indonesia. What do you make of the theme today, and is this something that works very well and is pertinent to your country today?
Yeah, exactly, Yasmin. Everyone always talking about investments, the government always want investment from all the countries in the world. But again, like what Julia just mentioned just now, challenge is always about the execution, where we can translate all this money to the real projects on the ground.
Okay, let's go to the ballroom here at the Ritz-Carlton in Jakarta. The CNA Summit begins with our MediaCorp CEO.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the CNA Summit 2026 on smart growth, navigating investment and innovation in a new era.
For more than 25 years,
it will truly make a pivotal mark in Indonesia's history.
CNA has helped you understand Asia.
People are trying to push the police back as much as they can.
Our journalists across the globe.
This is the largest relief campsite.
Go beyond breaking news to make sense of the moments that shape Asia.
We would like to work with everybody.
Together with our production team, we deliver original, in-depth documentaries that reveal Asia's complexities. From our digital-first integrated newsroom headquartered in Singapore.
Good morning, this is Asia First.
And here are the headlines we are following.
CNA brings you a wider coverage of Asia
Good evening, I'm Lopez with tonight's top stories.
than any other channel.
We are joined now by CNA senior correspondent.
And we keep the conversation going.
Thanks so much for your...
With trusted voices, live on air, and stories you can listen to on the go. CNA's in-depth reporting and engaging storytelling has earned the newsroom widespread and continuous recognition on the global stage.
जैसा भी हो चाहे हम लोग मारे जाते हैं चाहे पुलिस वाले मारे जाते हैं.
Saya ngasih obat sendiri dan nggak taunya obat itu ternyata.
I ran to the shin like a hell. It is very deadly day to day.
China's censors have scrubbed the images from the country's internet. The channel of the year is CNA from Singapore's MediaCorp, global winner of the Best News Website or Mobile Service Award.
Across digital platforms, we've logged over 1 billion page views at CNA.Asia and more than 450 million views on YouTube. And with CNA.ID, our Perkasa Indonesia service, we're expanding our reach to an even bigger audience. Today, CNA reaches 150 million homes and connected devices worldwide. For the insights into Asia, from Asia, CNA, understand Asia.
Selamat pagi Bapak Ibu hadirin yang terhormat, selamat datang di CNA Summit 2026. Berikan tepuk tangan untuk kita semua yang sudah hadir di sini. Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And first of all, good morning to Mr. Rosan Perkasa Roeslani, Minister of Investment and Downstream Industry, Republic of Indonesia, and also Chairman of BKPM and CEO of Danantara Indonesia. Good morning to you, sir. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Olivia Marzuki. I'm proud to be a CNA presenter, but I'm even prouder to be here with you all. Wonderful people in this wonderful morning. Another round of applause for everyone who's here. So on behalf of MediaCorp, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone here at CNA Summit 2026, and also a friendly hello to those watching online on CNA's live stream YouTube, where we have more than 5 million subscribers, and in the last 12 months, we have garnered more than 450 million views across our content. We're also live streaming today on our platform called Video, Indonesian Video, to further extend our reach to audiences across Indonesia. All right, a special thank you, not to mention, our main sponsor, Singtel, for making this summit possible. Singtel is Asia's leading communication technology group. Thank you for your support to CNA Summit. All right, I hope that everyone's equally excited, as I am, to get this summit started. Speaking of this summit, the CNA Summit started in 2020. It is our flagship, by invitation only, leadership event that provides a global platform for thought leaders to share their insights into issues that are facing the region today. This is the 7th CNA Summit, and in our series, this is the first time we are hosting it outside Singapore, here in my hometown, Jakarta. So it reflects CNA's mission to really get global audiences to really understand Asia, starting from within the region itself. Today, we have a very unique opportunity. We'll be listening into 3 major investment companies and institutions. We have Danantara, Indonesia's sovereign wealth fund. We have Temasek, Singapore's global investment company, and Khazanah Nasional, Malaysia's sovereign wealth fund. So without further ado, I'd like to invite MediaCorp CEO, Ms. Tham Lo Keng, to deliver her welcome address and get this started. Lo Keng, big round of applause.
Good morning, our guest of honor, Your Excellency Mr. Rosan, Perkasa Roeslani, Minister of Investment and Downstream Industry and Chief Executive Officer at Danantara. Distinguished guests, friends, colleagues, it is a pleasure to see so many of you here today in person. Thank you for making the time to join us. Also, a very warm welcome for everyone who's streaming in via our global live stream on CNA's YouTube and on video in Indonesia today. I am pleased to welcome you to our 7th CNA Summit, our annual initiative that brings leaders together to exchange ideas on the issues shaping Asia and the world. Following last year's discussions on trade-offs in leadership, today we turn our attention to smart growth, navigating investment and innovation in a new era. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, MediaCorp is Singapore's national media network and largest content creator. Our news brand CNA started as a local newsroom, but is today a global network, reaching 150 million homes and connected devices worldwide. At the heart of CNA's work is a simple mission: to help the world understand Asia. We do this by providing on-ground reporting, context, and nuance, helping leaders, investors, and policymakers understand not just what is happening, but why it matters, so that capital and innovation can move with confidence and conviction. To do this well, we invest in being close to the stories that we cover. In Indonesia, that has meant building a stronger editorial presence through CNA.id and expanding our Bahasa Indonesia content. These efforts have helped us reach a wider Indonesian audience, and today we're here to extend that engagement even further by taking the CNA Summit beyond Singapore to Jakarta for the first time. We are also meeting at a time of ambition and strategic renewal under President Prabowo Subianto's administration that is felt keenly across the region. This environment that is rich with opportunity, yet shaped by greater complexity, is exactly why we have chosen smart growth as our focus today. Assembled in this room are leaders from every sector: agriculture, technology, industry, innovation. This diversity is intentional. We believe smart growth only happens when the entire chain is connected. Importantly, we are all navigating the same landscape, defined by shifting geopolitics and the breakneck speed of AI, but also a more disciplined capital environment. So the leadership challenge is how do we grow with resilience and accountability? At MediaCorp, we found that navigating the landscape comes down to 3 pillars: technology, trust, and talent. Technology is the accelerator. Across every sector that is represented here, we see technology driving productivity and scale. At CNA, we have been using AI to supercharge our newsrooms, transcribing, translating, editing, breaking news in real time, to personalizing content for millions of digital users. These tools free our teams from repeatable workflows to focus on what matters, higher value reporting, and it's helped us to work smarter than ever before. But we are also clear that these tools do not replace human judgment. Striking this balance between AI capabilities and human expertise is pivotal to smart growth. It allows us to scale our impact, but we remain fully responsible for every piece of content we produce. Which then brings me to trust. It is the universal currency, and in my industry, if we lose the trust of our audience in the rush to maybe be first to break a story, we lose our business. That is why we work very, very hard to maintain CNA's standing as Singapore's most trusted news brand, a recognition that we have received from the Reuters Institute year after year. We don't take this for granted. It drives, in fact, every decision that we make in the newsroom. And I believe the same is true for everyone in this room, whether you are reporting a story, whether we are building a platform, or managing $1 billion investment. Trust from your customers, from your regulators, from your investors, that is what allows our businesses to scale. And finally, talent. Truly smart growth isn't just about chasing that quick win. It is about having the stamina to go the distance. And that stamina is always built on people, on continued investment in talent and capability. So when we invest in our people, we aren't just building a company, we are building that human infrastructure that makes growth sustainable. To help us move from these principles to a practical roadmap, we have brought together today the people who are leading this charge. Our goal is that you leave here today with a clearer view of where the opportunities are forming, how leaders are de-risking innovation, and which partnerships are proving durable. As you move through today's program, I would encourage all of us to exchange experiences openly, not just our successes, but also the lessons that have been learned along the way. Smart growth is rarely linear, but it is always collaborative. So on that note, please allow me to thank our partners and our main sponsor, Singtel, for their support, and all of you for being part of this conversation today. Thank you, and I wish you a rewarding day ahead.
Thank you, Lo Keng. Looking forward to a very rewarding session indeed. And next, we have our guest of honor. We're very privileged to have Minister Rosan. I'd like to invite Minister Rosan on stage for his keynote address. Mr. Rosan Perkasa Roeslani, ladies and gentlemen, Minister of Investment and Downstream Industry, Chairman of BKPM, and CEO of Danantara Indonesia.
Good morning, everyone. Well, first of all, I would like to thank MediaCorp and also CNA for inviting me here today to share with all of you about the plan, about our ministry, and obviously about Danantara a little bit, because I'm wearing two hats as Minister of Investment and Downstream Industry, and also at the same time heading the Danantara, our sovereign wealth fund here in Indonesia. And I see a lot of familiar faces, especially also the Excellency Singapore Ambassador to Indonesia, my friend, and also I see the former Foreign Minister, Bapak Martin Natalegawa. Where are you, Pak? Okay. Thank you also for coming, and also all the distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm also very pleased to know that I think this is the first time the CNA Summit is held in in Jakarta, out of Singapore, because Jakarta now I think is the pulse of the regional growth is loudest here in Indonesia, in Jakarta. Well, if we are talking about investment, yes, we are talking about trust. You mentioned it earlier in your remark. We are talking about confidence. We are talking about stability. And Indonesia, we always maintain peace and stability as our strength to attract investment, to attract quality investment here in Indonesia. Yes, for many decades, we still managed to have economic growth about 5%, except during the COVID time. For a lot of countries, having 5% economic growth is very good, right? I think most of you here in the audience agree with me. But our leader, under the leadership of President Prabowo, we would like to have our economic growth reach 8% by 2029. By 2029. And obviously, investment will play a very significant role for achieving this goal. Because if we see the formation of our economic growth formation, mostly come from governments, mostly come from domestic consumption, about 53-54%, and then 29 to 30% come from investment, and then government spending about 7 to 8%, export, net export about 2%. So obviously, investment playing a very significant role to achieve those 8% economic growth. And based on the number from our national agency planning, they give the number to us that for the next 5 years, actually until 2029, we need to reach the investment about $800 billion by 2029. And it's, well, definitely it's not easy. Definitely it's not easy. Because there's about 43% increase compared to for the past decade from 2004 from 2014 to 2024. Actually, the total investment is is about $500 billion, and then for the next 5 years, then we need to reach about $800 billion if we want to reach the investment growth, the economic growth about 8%. So this is the big number, right? And for us, they said Indonesia, we have a lot of potential. But I think the most important for us, when we would like this investment, the quality investment, at the same time, we need to create more jobs. I think that's the key, because human capital is the key for us if we want to have more sustainable growth in Indonesia. And because, I may share a little bit, every year we produce about 2 million babies. So every 3 years we produce one Singapore, right? Every 3 years. So can you imagine then? Definitely we need to have, not only investment, quality investment, not only creating jobs, but also quality jobs. Right? And if you are talking about the potential here in Indonesia, I think it's aligned with the appetite of investment, all over the world. If I may share a little bit, one of the potential definitely in renewable energy. According to Ministry of Energy, we have the potential up to 3,700 gigawatts of renewable energy. But currently, the installed capacity is only 15.8 gigawatts, which is it's less than 1%. So it's less than 1%. So the potential can be from solar, hydro, wind, geothermal. I think geothermal is very interesting because I think in Indonesia we have one of the largest reserve of geothermal, especially in Java and Sumatra area. In Java and Sumatra area. So this is a huge potential. So in the same time, we in order to attract more investment, we need also to improve our investment climate, our industry climate in the same time. So that's why we are simplifying a lot of rules, policy, regulation, because I know sometimes we are also competing with our neighboring countries to attract our foreign direct investment. But that's why improving the investment climate is very important for Indonesia. In the same time, having a good talent, I think that's very, very important also for us to attract investment here to Indonesia. So, and this is just a potential, but again, this potential will remain, it will remain as potential if we do nothing about it. We hear that Indonesia is the next tiger for economic growth in ASEAN for many, many years. For many, many years. But sometimes the implementation is always a challenge. So now we have this opportunity, but how we can now accelerate the implementation of our opportunity, of our plan in the future also in the same time. So that's on the, I said very quick on the renewable energy. But also in the same time, we also have a big opportunity in downstream industries. I have to mention of downstream industry now because in my ministry, not only Ministry of Investment, but also downstream industry. So downstream industry usually, related to oil and gas. But we have this downstream industry perception in the big way to have more value added here in Indonesia. Again, why? To create more quality jobs. For example, now Indonesia, if I may share with you, now we have the whole ecosystem of EV battery. Because Indonesia, we have the largest reserve of nickel in the world. About 42% of the nickel in the world actually is mostly the location in Indonesia, in Sulawesi and Maluku. Now, after we have this, we put the export control on nickel since 2016. Now we have all the whole ecosystem of EV battery, not only the nickel ore, the mining, but all the way to the cell battery, battery pack, and also the recycled battery here in Indonesia. So we would like to have that kind of investment also, because aligned with the perspective of the world. And that's one of our competitiveness. But obviously we will be very careful also to put export control in any other commodities, because we know for nickel, for palm oil, for seaweed. Actually, Indonesia, we are the second largest producer of seaweed in the world. But if we are talking about tropical seaweed, then we are the number one, producer of seaweed in the world. We also are actually the number one for coconut producer in the world. But I have to admit, in all many countries, actually they are more familiar with Thailand, for example, because the downstream of coconut hasn't been really developed here in Indonesia. So now we also attracting more investment, not only in minerals, in downstream of minerals, but also in forestry, and also in aquaculture. Even though the investment, and I give you an example because we just get the investment in coconut. The investment only $100 million in Morowali. Hopefully will be completed by the end of this year. But it can absorb up to 10,000 workers. 10,000 workers. If you compare it with investment in downstream of minerals, $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion. But in terms of absorbing the employment, actually is much lesser. But but again, still it creates more quality job here in Indonesia. I think they have this graph, because I use this graph a lot. But again, this is the blueprint that we have in our Ministry of Investment about the blueprint of based on the mineral, oil and gas, fishery and marine affairs, also plantation and forestry. So also now we are going to do a downstreaming in the seaweed. I think that also very promising, since also it will involve a lot of smallholders, a lot of farmers in Indonesia. So again, now we are also pushing to have downstream industry in seaweed. So distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we also, not only we are concentrated in downstream in minerals, in aquaculture, and also in fishery, but also, we are also see the potential, a lot of potential in digital economy here in Indonesia. Because, well, if you are talking about digital economy, here in Indonesia. I think currently the value of our digital economy here in Indonesia is about 150, 160 billion US dollar here in Indonesia. Can be up to double 300 billion by year 2030. And I think more than 200 Indonesian already connected with internet. We are always among the top 5 use of social media. You name it, from WhatsApp, IG, everything is always among the top 5. And also, we have again abundance of renewable energy that we can translate to power the digital economy. The data center. I think all of us in the ASEAN we are looking to have more investment also in data center, like Malaysia, in Johor, in Thailand. Also, now we are also preparing to have more investment in data center using renewable energy, especially in Batam area. We are also preparing those areas to have more investment in data center. So those kind of things, and also, if I would like to share with you that we have launched also under Danantara. Maybe I jump a little bit into Danantara. Launched the Waste to Energy program, actually just last November. So, we launched on the first batch of the 4 cities already to have waste to energy in 4 different cities, but we will have it in all 33 cities. Currently, in the 4 cities, we launched it already. Hopefully, we will announce it. We launch it in November, the end of November. We will announce it the winner in February, actually, the end of February, and hopefully in April or May we can start the groundbreaking for the first 4 cities. So this is also very promising, because when we start launching this program, Waste to Energy program, more than 150 companies would like to participate from all over the world. And targeting 33 cities. So this is one opportunity also that we would like you to participate, because this is again one program that have a lot of appetite from all different countries, from all different investors, because they know not only they do the investment, but also they are creating a better life for Indonesia, especially for Indonesian. So this kind of investment that we keep promoting here in Indonesia, and since now we also have Danantara, I think I need to mention about Danantara a little bit, even though I know most of you are already familiar with Danantara, because since a year ago, well, actually we launched it in November last year. We consolidate all the asset of the state-owned enterprise under Danantara, under one umbrella. So we find out actually we have more than 1,000 companies under Danantara now, in all different various sector, mostly in 14 sector, and all the SOE now we manage, and also we own and we manage all this asset, and we can reinvest all the dividend that we receive, because we don't need to transfer it anymore to Ministry of Finance, so we can invest and reinvest the fund from the dividend that we receive from our SOE. So now we would like, obviously, work with Temasek, with our friend in Khazanah, how we can collaborate and together, because there are a lot of potential that we can do together. Because now ASEAN, I think I believe if the best region for economic growth, and we need to collaborate together. Again, because we strongly believe they are among our ASEAN countries, we are complementary each other. We can learn from each other. So again, Indonesia, definitely we are open for business, and we know if we do together, we always can achieve in a lot of better output together also in the same time. Well, they remind me already that my time is up because there's still another session. So luckily they remind me, otherwise I just keep talking and I will use up all the time. But at the end, now with Danantara, it also gives a confidence, or also give a trust, because now we can invest together with the foreign investor to invest here in Indonesia. And it definitely will give them the confidence, and not only we are looking in terms of the return, but also now we are also looking how we can create more quality job here in Indonesia. Well, thank you very much.
Pak Rosan, thank you. We'd like to continue this discussion through a fireside chat, and for that I'd like to invite my colleague Shani Vavani. She's our correspondent for CNA here in Jakarta. So Shani, the stage is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to now have Mr. Rosan Perkasa Roeslani join me here for a fireside chat. As you all know, Mr. Rosan is Indonesia's Minister of Investment and Downstream Industry and Chairman of the Investment Coordinating Board, BKPM, and he also serves as Chief Executive Officer of Danantara Indonesia, the sovereign wealth fund established to prioritize and optimize government investments for national economic growth. With a distinguished career spanning both public service and business leadership, including roles as Vice Minister of State-Owned Enterprises and Ambassador of Indonesia to the United States, Mr. Rosan brings deep expertise across finance, mining, healthcare, property, and media. And over the next 20 minutes, we have the opportunity to gain insight from an individual with exceptional expertise and ask questions that I know some of you in the audience here are also keen to hear about. Please join me once more in welcoming Minister Rosan Perkasa Roeslani, everyone.
Thank you.
Pak Rosan, I would like to kick things off by referring to some of what you've just shared with us. As you said, Indonesia aims to attract over $800 billion in investments to achieve an 8% economic growth by 2029. Could you walk us through the path to meet that target, Pak?
Well, yes, 800 billion, it sounds like a very big number, right? But if I may share a little bit, last year in 2025, we achieved the target of about $120 billion US. So we achieved a target slightly above the target from our national agency planning. And we believe, if we do it the right thing, we can achieve the target. Do the right things, meaning, because when you invest in Indonesia, we always hear, it's very complicated, this regulation give you a headache. And also issue about the talent, So, again, like I mentioned earlier, so the first thing that we have to do is we have to keep reforming ourselves, in terms of policy, in terms of regulation, and create better investment climate. Because if we are talking about opportunity, well, we have abundant opportunity from all different various sectors. I mentioned it earlier, from renewable energy, from downstream industry, digital economy, healthcare, tourism industry. Now, we have a huge potential because 40% of ASEAN, the economic growth comes from Indonesia. The population of ASEAN, 650 million, 37% also come from Indonesia. So, again, we have a scale, we have the opportunity, but we need to work to improve our investment climate. That's the homework. In the same time, we need to make sure that also we have, a good talent. So that's why our government, we give a fiscal incentive up to 200% actually since 2022 if companies, foreign or local companies, if they participate in vocational training and education. So we give a fiscal incentive up to 200%. heading to 8% economic growth. We believe we are on the right track, but we just need to accelerate, to accelerate the implementation. Because if you are talking about, the pool of capitals, yes, there's enough pool of capitals, enough liquidity in the market, but also again, when I mentioned it earlier that now with Danantara, we also can, participate, and we would like with having Danantara, we would like to empower also working together with the private sector, because the pie of Indonesian economic growth actually is getting bigger and bigger. That's why we need to work together. The government, private sector, foreign investor, we need to work together because the economic pie of Indonesia is getting bigger, and we need all the participants, we need all the support from all different investors, countries to work together with us. So yes, if I may say, we are heading on the right direction. Yeah.
If we look at something a little closer, Pat, towards the near term, do you perhaps have a North Star for Indonesia's investment strategy for 2026 and 2027?
Yes, I think one thing that we need to address is about the consistency and also the predictability, right? Because if an investor, you don't like surprises. You don't like surprises. You want everything to be precise, very transparent, very consistent, and also stability. And I think that's the first one. The second one, we need to come up with a good policy also. We launched some of the program already, but we need to show the consistency and the transparency of the process itself. I mentioned it a little bit, for example, waste to energy, is in 33 different cities. That's actually on the first phase, meaning that's actually is the minimum of 1,000 tons a day of waste. The second tranche will be below 1,000, between 600 to 1,000 ton waste per day. So I think we need to show the transparency of the process, because the appetite again is huge in those kind of projects. Also, in 2027, 2028, again we see the appetite to invest in many countries is aligned with our goals. For example, in renewable energy, under PLN, the planning between 2025 to 2034 actually 76% of our new power generation will come from renewable energy and nuclear. Actually, it was already stated in our PLN, our SOE electricity company. So we believe that what we plan actually align with the appetite of the market, of the world. Again, we just need to make sure the implementation can be done properly, and also in the same time can be done in very high standard of operation.
But when you speak of global appetite, where would you say is global investment capital leaning towards right now, and why do those specific sectors that they're leaning towards stand out in the context of Indonesia?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier. They are leaning more on the AI, on the digital economy, also obviously in renewable energy. Because Indonesia also, we are committed to have net zero emission by 2060. Now it's been revised to 2050. We want to be more aggressive on those parts. Obviously, we have potential also in carbon capture. We are now have the investment already in carbon capture by all the big names here in Indonesia. So, but when they want to invest in carbon capture, we come up with a very good policy and regulation also in the same time. So I think again we align with the appetite of the global investors, because we also reach out to them, we listen to them, what is the concern, what they want, in order for them to have investment, in Indonesia. And one thing that they share with us, they share with me actually, is the certainty. They know that when they invest, there's a long-term commitment. There's always a risk when they do investment. But what they don't want to have is uncertainty. So certainty is very important. Certainty and continuity. So based on that one, we want to make sure that, we are very open, that if you want to invest in Indonesia, okay, this is the opportunity, this is the risk, it's a calculated risk. Because it's a long-term commitment. It's just marriage, it's a long-term commitment. So again, all this issue, I think we address it already, but how we can, convince them this is the plan and this is the implementation and this is the outcome from all of our initiatives that have a positive impact to their investment in Indonesia.
When we speak, as you've mentioned several times as well, when we speak of certainty and consistency, and of course convincing investors that this is the right place to put their money, one of the biggest challenges when it comes to Indonesia here is regulation. What new reforms can you share that are being introduced to make it easier for investors to navigate the country's regulatory landscape, especially when it comes to a regional level?
Okay. Definitely there's certainty and predictability, right? And I think I believe that, under our ministry, we come up with the new government regulation actually just a couple of months ago, I think in September. So definitely it will give a predictability. Why? Because now, I think this is, I can share it with you. Now we consolidate all 28 ministries and agencies for permit and licenses into our ministry, to our investment ministry. We integrate all the process. And, we give them the clarity that if the other ministry miss the deadline, our Ministry of Investment will issue the permit automatically. So, for example, my ministry have agreement with the other ministry that they will issue permits, a certain permit at a certain date, like 10 days. In the past, from 10 days can be 20 days, can be 3 months, can be 6 months. It gives them uncertainty. Now, if that designated ministries doesn't reply back to us or miss the deadline under our we call it service level agreement, then automatically I will issue the licenses. So since September until now, actually, we issue more than 188 licenses based on this new government regulation. We call it positive fictitious. So again, this is one of the reform that we do to give more predictability, especially in getting permits and licenses in Indonesia. Even if you want to get a fiscal incentive, like a tax holiday, tax allowance, you don't need to go to the Ministry of Finance. I can issue that licenses. I mean, I can grant you the fiscal incentive. So again, this is I think a big reform because it involves 28 ministries and agencies. We are aiming. That's the first step. The second step, we would like to integrate again in second layer, which is provincial level. In the provincial level, we would like to integrate it also the licensing and permit in provincial level into our ministry. I know this is a big task. A big task. It's easy to say than done. Even on this ministerial level, we need, it takes time also because they have a different system, we have a different system. Now we have to make sure that it's compatible each other. But I think this is one of the reform that we do, again, to improve our investment climate here in Indonesia.
Are there any specific hurdles or specific bottlenecks, you would say, that in your view tends to discourage investors more than others? And in view of those bottlenecks or in view of those hurdles, how are you providing clarity to them? And are those measures enough, you would say?
Yeah. One of the not the hurdle, maybe the concern is pool of talent also. Because when they invest, especially in capital intensive and needed a high level of technical person, they always ask also the readiness of the talent. So during those, for example, they will build a manufacturing, the high-end manufacturing. Usually it will take about 2 years, 3 years, or even more, but usually 2 years. So during those days, we make sure that we provide the talent, we talk to them, and we give them, again, a fiscal incentive up to 200% for the vocational training and education, and to have this talent of good talent. Actually, is one of our homework. If I look at the numbers for employee from Indonesian workers who have a background of degree on college or universities, actually it's only 13 to 14% out of 141 million people. Only 13 to 14%. At the same time, we need to boost the productivity. We need to boost the efficiency. So we know if we want to put everybody into college, it will take some time. So that's why vocational training and education is very important for us. To upskilling, to reskilling our workers, our employee, in order for them again to improve the productivity and efficiency in the same time.
Going back to what you shared just now as well on condensing sort of things in the ministry. If we go to Danantara has set what can be said as an ambitious goal to triple the value of assets under its management by 2030. Now, a key strategy of doing this are your plans to merge over 1,000 state-owned enterprises into some little over 200 entities within the next 3 to 4 years. That sounds like a major challenge, but how are you planning to do this? How are you going to tackle it?
Well, it can take like the whole day if I share the full plan. But definitely I can share it with you because in the beginning we thought, when we consolidate all the assets under our Danantara, maybe 800 companies. That's always the number that we hear. End up we found out 900, 1,000, to be precise, is 1,044 companies. But if you're looking at our SOE, 92% of our dividend only comes from 12 companies. Out of 1,000, only come from 12 companies. So definitely in the same time, you can say there's an issue, and at the same time, you see there's an opportunity, right? So we found out that more than 1,000 companies, and in the same time, big asset, we want to optimize the asset. We want to create more values. So that's why we do, for the past 1 year, we do a major assessment to all these 1,000 companies. Because it's very hard also if you have to supervise, to manage 1,000 companies. I think it's better you manage lesser companies, but you manage properly with high standard of good governance, high standard of transparency, high standard of accountability, high standard of integrity. I think that's most important for us. So that's why from 1,000, when we do a major assessment, then we end up, we can reduce the number close to 300 companies. Right? To have a better, again, better productivity, better efficiency, and also a better human capital. And we see also most of them actually out of their core business. For example, they are a leasing company. Somehow they have hotels. They have like 3 hotels. They have a construction company, but they have event organizer. They are, other company, they have even like a garment company, and actually they are seaport, airport companies. So we make them to back into the core business, right? When we do the assessment, somehow we found out, we have 137 hotels. 137 hotels. And then we found out, we have 75 hospitals. And most of them running poorly, if I may say. So, again, that's an issue, but also in the same time, that's opportunity, right? So, we would like to consolidate. We are also open to privatize. Even we're just going to shut down, just close down some of the companies. And actually, within 3 months, we shut down 100 companies already. And actually, we just want them to back into their core business, focus on that one. If they are in the healthcare industry, yes, they can focus, in the hospitals, in pharmaceuticals, not focus in the leasing company. So, it's very interesting actually. It's very interesting. In the same time, it's not easy. It's challenging. But for us, yes, if your dividend, 92% of your dividend only come from 12 companies, when you own and manage 10,000 companies, definitely you need to do something about it, right? Simple as that.
And when we talk of good governance and transparency, how can Danantara increase accountability for state-owned enterprises while still keeping its investors satisfied?
Yeah, because Danantara, we have 2 roles, right? Actually, one is managing our SOE asset. The second one is do the investment, like our friends here, the CIO of Temasek and Khazanah, right? The investment side, we can do a lot of investment if our SOE is healthy. Why? Because the money that we can do to deploy the fund, it comes from the dividend, right? For example, last year we received, not last year, last year about $8 billion US dollar of dividend. So we can invest all equity money, $8 billion US dollar, right? That without leverage. If I do a leverage 4 times, still acceptable, right? 5 times, it's still acceptable, right? That's 40 billion. You time 5, I have a muscle to invest 200 billion for the next 5 years, right? So, again, we can invest in all different class of asset. Public, private asset. And again, that's why good governance and transparency, accountability is the key for us to run properly Danantara, which it has 2 roles, managing the asset and also do the investment. Yeah.
As Danantara approaches the end of its first year, what would you say are the lessons learned?
Well, the lesson learned, actually, it's very hard to find a very good human capital. That's the hardest part. Right? To change the mindset that now they have to run as corporate. They have to think about the outcome, not only the process. Because the SOE, our SOE in the past, we make sure all the process is right. Yes, the process it has to be right, but the outcome also has to be optimal. So, and yeah, they have, a lot of them just sitting on the comfort zone, Not anymore. No? Not anymore. You have to run as a corporate with the high standard of, like I mentioned, good governance, transparency, accountability, and integrity. So that's the KPI. So again, we can revise or we can change the business process. You know, we can change we can have all the good plan. You know, but if the people, you don't have proper people, right people on the right place, that's going to be an issue. So having a talent of best people, good people, I think is the key for getting all of this done.
I know we're running out of time now, Pa, so I'd like to wrap things up with one final question. We have Temasek here, we have Khazanah here, and as you mentioned, you are open to a collaboration. May I ask, Pa, what is your vision?
Yes, this is time for our region actually. No, let's work together because, you know, we work already to have a joint fund, for example, with Qatar, with QIA, $4 billion fund. We have already a joint fund with CIC from China. And also we are on discussion with other funds. No, I think this is time for us, you know, to have more collaboration among ASEAN countries, not only in terms of trade, but also I think in investment also. Even though Singapore always been a number one investor for Indonesia for the last decade, you know, we highly thankful and very appreciate. But I believe there's still an untapped potential that we can work together in order to achieve all the goals. Thank you.
And with this, Pa, we've come to the end of our session. Thank you, Pa Rosan, for an engaging and insightful chat. It's been a pleasure to hear your perspectives.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Rosan. I'd like to invite MediaCorp CEO Tham Lo Keng to deliver a little token of appreciation. We really appreciate your time, your insight, and your participation in CNA Summit 2026. We're hoping that together we will achieve that smart growth path for navigating investment and innovation in the new era. Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for Minister Rosan Roeslani. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor. As part of CNA's commitment to broaden our outreach and serve more audience across Indonesia, we have launched the CNA.ID, the Bahasa Indonesia version of CNA. Let's take a look at this following video.
In Indonesia, news moves fast, and audiences want clarity and depth from a trusted source. That's why CNA is one of the most widely read English-language news sources in Indonesia.
Pledged to boost growth,
bringing global coverage and Asia-focused reporting to millions.
The number of addicts jumped 4 times.
In April 2024, we took the next step, launching CNA.ID, our Bahasa Indonesian platform, to connect with Indonesia's increasingly diverse audiences looking for trusted insights on local and regional developments. Here, audiences get the stories that matter most, original and translated reports from CNA's correspondents across Indonesia and the world.
This city, Changsha.
Analysis that cuts through the noise. And documentaries in Bahasa Indonesia.
Jika kalian tanya apa hubungan kami saat ini normal, jawaban saya tidak.
Today, CNA.ID records an average of 1.5 million page views every month. And we're just getting started. To build momentum, we're raising awareness through large-scale, out-of-home and nationwide digital campaigns, a fast-growing WhatsApp channel, interactive quizzes,
jangan sampai ketinggalan,
and collaborations with trusted local influencers.
Di sini juga banyak banget berita-berita terkini seputar Asia yang bisa kita baca berbahasa Indonesia.
And we're set to unveil a refreshed look for CNA.ID around March 2026. Clear, credible, compelling. From Indonesia, for Indonesia. This is CNA.ID, your guide to understand Asia.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was our CNA.ID. In case you haven't done that, please browse our CNA.id when you are in Indonesia. We're very proud to bring this in Bahasa Indonesia, my native language. Ladies and gentlemen, for our next session, we'll get a perspective from a global investment company on building long-term growth. So for that, I'd like to invite on stage Mr. Rohit Sipahimalani, Chief Investment Officer of Temasek, which will be accompanied by my colleague Elizabeth Nyo, who presents business news on CNA's Asia First, Monday to Friday. And we will get a perspective on allocating for advantage: sovereign capital, smart growth, and regional resilience. Please welcome them on stage. Rohit and Liz. Good morning.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Now, I'd just like to start by talking about some of the factors. As a financial journalist, we've been tracking really few large moves across financial markets. We're talking about tariffs, tech, metals, flying high one day, melting down the other, a fight over the US Federal Reserve, really no shortage of factors that we're seeing really shape markets. And we see trillions wiped out only to be regained in a matter of days, in a matter of weeks. And we're living in a new normal when it comes to multilateralism, globalization, and even geopolitics. And so major asset managers, they've got to become more cautious, more constructive, and at times maybe even a little bit more cunning, especially if they're going to be in it for the long haul. And today, we have the honor of speaking with Temasek CIO, Mr. Rohit Sipahimalani, on how Temasek is, of course, making those decisions to stay ahead of the next cycle, thinking for the next generation as well. So we're really glad to be able to talk to you today, Rohit. So, we're really just operating in an age of great uncertainty. And how do you think, how would you explain the landscape that Temasek, this landscape to investors, and how Temasek is viewing risk and opportunity to people who may not fully perhaps understand all the forces at play and the knock-on effects?
Well, just given everything you said, there's clearly a lot of noise out there, but if I have to summarize it, I would say it is an exciting period. We are seeing growth accelerating across the world this year, driven by AI capex, but also with governments all over the world pursuing fiscal expansionary policy to support growth in their markets. In fact, this is probably the first year in I don't know how long where almost every major market is projecting consensus earnings growth in the double digits. Now, that's the exciting part, but as you said, there's still a period of heightened uncertainty. And I think it's uncertainty that you will continue to see over the next few years at levels that we've probably not seen in the last 40 years or so. And that's driven by geopolitics, rising nationalism, protectionism. AI, it's a big thing. It's going to be a huge opportunity for companies, but it's also going to be highly disruptive for a number of companies. Climate change, we're talking about it a little less right now, but it will be an existential issue for a number of companies. And I would say the increasing role of governments in industrial policy, which together with populist pressures to spend will make sure that you have high fiscal deficits, high debts from governments, and therefore probably higher interest rates than you've seen in the last 10, 15 years. Now, all this is in the context of a world where valuations today, particularly in the developed markets, are very high by any standard, 1 to 2 standard deviations over, let's say, 10-year averages. And valuations are not necessarily a good predictor of markets in the short term, but they're almost always a good predictor of longer-term returns. So that's the environment we're in. There's significant opportunity, but given some of the challenges, we need to figure out how to navigate through that. And every investor needs to.
Seem a little bit more optimistic than I am. But when we talk about long-term investing, what does it actually mean when the rules seem to be changing so rapidly?
I think you have to be long-term because with shocks and news and wars and everything coming out every second or third day, if you start reacting to everything from a short-term perspective, you're going to get whipsawed. So, right now, we're debating, will the US attack Iran or not? What will be the implication on oil prices? What's it going to do to certain type of companies or sectors? But if you think about it from a 2-3 month perspective, it's very difficult to sort of work through that. So you really have to have a long-term perspective so that you can cut out the noise and look and see what really matters and what's really going to impact businesses in the longer term. Having said that, given the uncertainty, I mean, we at like Temasek, for example, we try to make sure that about 60% of our portfolio is in businesses that we call resilient, which means that regardless of the outcome, you'd have a narrow range of outcomes. And how do you predict that? You look to see in the past, have these businesses, what has been the volatility of their cash flows, again, in different environments? And looking forward, how will they be impacted by some of the issues that I sort of mentioned? And, you know, so why are more people looking to invest in infrastructure today? It's more stable across most of the scenarios that I talked about. That's an example of resilience. But otherwise, for example, we would invest more in companies which have access to large domestic markets and are self-sufficient from a technology supply chain within one geoeconomic sphere of influence. So, you know, banks in India or hospitals in India or consumer brands in China. So these things are naturally more resilient and you can take a longer-term perspective. Now, there is the other part when you're investing in things like AI where there's more uncertainty, but you can't ignore that. But you got to size how much of that you want in the portfolio, and you got to make sure that, you know, compared to the last 10 years, I would probably say we would have a little more listed exposure than unlisted exposure, because that's the segment where you can pivot. If things are not working out the way you wanted to work out, you know, you can pivot. Whereas if you're stuck in a private deal for 5 or 10 years, it's more difficult to do that. So it's tough to navigate, but if you have the approach of resilience, have the approach that you want to have in things that are more uncertain, you have the flexibility to pivot, I think you can navigate this environment fine.
One of the factors also is this greater fragmentation, you know, where capital is tighter, it's not moving as freely as before. I mean, how should countries be thinking differently about money? I mean, should they rely more on their own savings versus foreign capital, which may look a little bit more uncertain, unpredictable? And how can they build strong markets at home?
I think that's a very important point. I think you're in a situation where capital, you know, there's going to be a war for capital, right? There's now suddenly huge demand, whether it's in AI, whether in other areas, trying to build resilience and infrastructure in different countries, and there's a shortage of capital. Now, I don't think we shouldn't rely on foreign capital. You want to operate, or countries need to operate in a way where it's conducive for foreign capital to come in. As we just heard, it's important to have consistency of policies, transparency to encourage that. But at the same time, you can't only rely on foreign capital. It's important to have more reliance on domestic capital. And there are a lot of things you can do for that. I mean, India is a very good example where in the last 10 years, through various practices they've done in the domestic capital markets, you now have about $3 billion per month of retail flows coming in through systematic investment plans. You got another equivalent amount coming in through domestic pension plans. So as a result, last year, where you had $20 billion of capital flow out from foreigners from the domestic market, the domestic market was up about 10% in local currency terms. So yes, you want to attract foreign capital, and I don't think we should do everything we can to do that. But for resilience, you need to make sure that you have infrastructure, practices, governance, transparency, so that domestic capital is encouraged to flow in to invest in the country.
And that may be, you know, a bit of a challenge for smaller economies like Singapore or maybe more emerging countries. So, you know, how is it different? Is the formula different for these sort of profiles?
It's clearly tougher, but it's not that it can't be done, right? What does it ultimately require? It requires, I mean, let's say if people in any one of these ASEAN countries prefer to invest in jewelry and gold than the stock market, right? And today, okay, it's the flavor of the day to do that. But more generally speaking, if you are comfortable that this is not a market market manipulation is addressed, if you're comfortable by the fact that there is good governance in companies, if you're comfortable that it's in an environment where the economy is growing and these companies can benefit with it, over a long period, equity is going to do much better than any of these other assets. But you've got to be comfortable with that. And you can see countries around the region are trying to sort of do that. I mean, Japan started its corporate governance efforts a couple of years ago. Korea has now started doing it. China is very focused. How do you make sure that, you know, domestic confidence can come back to put money in the capital market? You know, people, there's so much savings, which is earning 1.5% in the bank, which earlier would go into real estate, which now they're not interested in. But what does it take to get them to come into the capital markets? And I think it's strong governance, and I'd say it's transparency, and we talked about it earlier, predictability, consistency of practices. And I think, you know, and then some amount of government support. You know, you've got to basically encourage your domestic pension funds to invest out here. In Singapore, there's a equity market development fund that's been set up to sort of invest out there and hopefully attract more capital. So yes, governments can do things to encourage that. In terms of attracting foreign capital, you know, we talked about regulatory uncertainty, but that's what institutions like INA can do by co-investing with the foreign partners, try and reduce that uncertainty for foreigners. So yes, there are challenges, but there are a lot of things that can be done to make sure that domestic capital is channeled for domestic investment.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're also taking questions. So if you have any questions you'd like Rohit to answer, you can use the Pigeonhole QR code on your table. Just scan that and send your questions in. Thank you so much. Rohit, so of course, I'm curious, how does, you know, Temasek then stress test its portfolio for, you know, world of these challenges that you've talked about, you know, even things like decoupling, buy local, that's become very common. And at the same time, how can investors, I suppose, protect their purchasing power when these policies drive up the price of innovation?
So as I said, from where we're looking at our portfolio, there's this focus on resilience, right? And I gave you examples of what are the types of things that would qualify as being more resilient. Focus on companies attacking domestic markets, things like infrastructure, other asset classes which are sort of less volatile. I think that's the approach we would do. And by having the right portfolio mix between these resilient businesses and others which may give you high returns but with a high level of uncertainty, I think we have to look at it as the portfolio as a whole. The second thing that I mentioned was one of the things that really helps with resilience is liquidity. Because there are a lot of things that we cannot predict. And we'll be hit with these shocks just like we were hit with COVID. But if you have low leverage and liquidity, it's easier to navigate through these cycles. During COVID, because we had a high level of liquidity going into it, not that we knew that COVID was sort of coming, we could afford to support Singapore Airlines with $15 billion at that point of time, which helped the airline strengthen itself compared to its peers during COVID because it could invest in the most efficient aircraft when no one else could really do that. So I would say these are the things that you do to build resilience. And particularly in this environment, I would say, you know, in between 2010 and 2020, in a zero-rate environment, a lot of people use a lot of leverage to increase returns. I would say leverage is something you've got to be cautious about in today's world. You know, a strong balance sheet and flexibility and liquidity is a big strength to help you navigate. Because if you can survive the shocks, you will come out of it and you'll do better.
Well, Rohit, Temasek has a long-standing investment portfolio in Indonesia that focuses on growth sectors. And the country has just gone through one of its strongest, sharpest market recalibration in years. How is this shaping your view on the growth sectors of tomorrow?
So a classic example, as I said, right? You have to take a longer-term view and not react to just short-term events as such. You know, I mean, clearly you've seen already the government spoken about addressing some of the issues that have been raised, and I'm pretty confident that will happen. For us, we continue to look at areas which we think will give us returns over the long term. So again, if you think of Indonesia, some of the investments we've done, Siloam Hospitals, Sociola, you know, domestic businesses relying on the domestic consumer, we just see under-penetration in these areas and therefore long runway for growth. And you'll have ups and downs, but as long as we are comfortable with the management of these companies, the governance of these companies, that's something we are very focused on. You know, making sure, and in that sense, we are probably don't want to come in too early into a company where those frameworks are not established, but where we can come in and help make sure that there's the right governance, we have the right management that can take this to the next level. And then apart from us, of course, our portfolio companies like PSA, Semcorp, etc., they are actively investing in Indonesia because they continue to see opportunities out here. And they, of course, because they're operators, they can be more hands-on, they can ensure their own governance, management, etc. Whereas we, as a financial investor, need to make sure that the target company that we're investing in has that, because that is going to be critical. And that's a big factor which will make a difference in terms of how investors view Indonesia, how investors use these companies, but also the success of these companies.
Yeah. Another market that is attractive to Temasek is India, because it accounts for about 8% of Temasek's portfolio. Temasek's China exposure, that's moderated some. Talk to us about, the attractiveness of India. What is India doing right?
So as I said, I mean, it sounds like a broken record out here, but it is a large domestic market with a lot of corporates which have good management teams and strong governance, which wasn't always there. But over the last decade, you've seen much improved governance because a lot of actions that the regulator has taken in the capital markets, etc. It has also taken a lot of steps to channel domestic savings into the capital markets, which has made the market much more stable and less volatile. But ultimately, again, it's a market that is growing at close to 7% in real terms, double digits in nominal terms. So it does have a lot of attractive features out there, particularly in some of these domestic-oriented industries. We're doing a lot there in healthcare and consumer and financials and things like that. So, yeah, but it's one of many markets we sort of look at, right? And but we do see attractive characteristics. It has been, I would say, the best performing market for us over the last decade. So we're quite excited about it.
Well, I know we talked about taking questions at the end, but I have one here that I think is pretty relevant to talking about the countries that the portfolios Temasek has. So this person asks, for Temasek, what sort of investment areas in Indonesia would be of interest?
So, as I mentioned, on the areas that we look at as a financial investor, it's been more of the domestic-oriented businesses, leveraging the digital economy out here, leveraging the large consumer base out here. And I gave two just examples right now, Siloam Hospital, Sociala. That's symptomatic of the types of things that we would look at. But actually, there are many other areas where our portfolio companies, and I mentioned that too, because particularly in areas like infrastructure, etc., it's tougher to do that as a financial investor. If you're an operator investor, it's much easier to navigate the environment, and not just in Indonesia, in any country. So which is why a lot of the stuff that we do across Asia, whether it's in India, in China, in Indonesia, on the infrastructure side is done a lot through our portfolio companies. But those are things that we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, another sector, maybe not just to Indonesia as well, but everyone's been just piling into tech, right? It's just been the theme for last couple of years at least. And so Temasek has invested across the AI value chain. You're looking at from infrastructure to your emerging innovators. Where does the real strategic advantage lie, especially given the high mortality rate of startups, given and also with tech companies staying private for longer? How do you separate the hype from what is real, and also the winners and the losers?
So again, this is an area of where things are changing so rapidly. As you said, there is going to be a high mortality rate of startups out here. But you got to look at the whole value chain and make an assessment of where the risk reward is interesting and how therefore you play. Jensen Huang recently talked about 5 levels at which you can play AI. The base is energy, right? The demand for energy is going to be huge. That actually is a very safe place to play because it's not just AI driven. With the whole move towards electrification and industrialization in different countries, the demand for power is going to be there, and that whole value chain is something that we are looking at, and which I think is a fairly safe place to play because it's, you can make the wrong investment decisions, but as a thematic, I think it's fairly safe. The next level is chips. And they're actually, they're a big beneficiary of the huge AI capex that's happening right now. And you have a large number of public companies who are fairly established in the space. So again, that's an easy place to play because look, AI will go through a correction, a big correction. As someone sort of pointed out, that if it doesn't, it would be the first transformative technology that has not gone through a period of being overbuilt and not seen a significant correction. So it's unlikely that you won't see it out here. But again, the chip space, which is benefiting right now, it's cyclical. But if you play it primarily through the listed space, you can be a little more nimble. If you see things changing, you can adapt to that. Then you have the level of the cloud, where the cloud platforms, all the Magnificent Seven, part of the big tech companies, and those you can play. Then on top of that are these LLMs, these AI labs. There are a few of them emerging. Significant opportunity. They're at nosebleed valuations, but some of them are going to justify those valuations. But there is going to be risk out there, and you can't not play there, but you got to pick your bets and probably be a bit diversified. And then the top are applications. And ultimately, in the long run, all new technologies, you start off with value being created in infrastructure, but ultimately moving to applications. The long run, that's where the most value is going to be created. That's where today you have the most startups. But in the near term, that's where the risk is the highest, because it's very difficult to predict who's going to win and who's going to lose. And so for us, diversification there is very important. And we rather play that through VC firms who are focused on the space where we get that diversification. As companies break out, we will look to invest in them directly. But at this stage, I would say that's the riskiest space. So overall, a very interesting area, but you've got to calibrate where to play in the private space, where to play in the listed space, where you have more of your portfolio in things which are not binary, and play a small amount where you, as a portfolio, invest in stuff which could be multi-baggers for you, but you could lose your money too. And I think you just have to calibrate on that basis.
Yeah. Rohit, I know you talked about the 60-40 split, so resilient and dynamic portfolio. And so in this era of still high interest rates, geopolitical fragmentation, how do you protect that 60% resilient core while you're still trying to capture that 40% dynamic upside that a generational fund would require?
So over a long term, actually, it's not that the resilient business does not give you good returns. It actually gives you very good returns, and it gives you more stable returns. The other 40%, there'll be some which will give you above average returns, but there's more risk out there. So you've got to be in a position where you're in a better position, or you're equipped to really choose the winners out there. The resilient, by definition, are businesses where we see a narrow range of outcomes. So we obviously, like I said, I mean, if something has a 50% chance of being hugely disrupted by AI, I would not call that a resilient company, right? So, but if something that's selling consumer staples in an emerging market, I mean, I would say, I'm simplifying, but it would definitely be more resilient than the other category that I talked about. So we look to make sure that more of our portfolio is resilient, but businesses that we do think will give us steady cash flows and dividends over a period, while at the same time trying to operate with other businesses which are reflective of some newer trends. And we have to be there, because frankly, if you're not there, sometimes a business that you thought was resilient, the environment may be changing and it may not be resilient going forward. But by knowing what's happening in the fast emerging spaces, it helps you feedback, helps our companies, help us guide them to invest in areas where they can build their resilience further. But also we recognize that, look, something's changing. We have to change our views and say, okay, we thought this was resilient, but let's see, this may not be the right company for us to invest in or stay invested in for the next few years.
Yeah, and how important is governance as of course, a driver of long-term value and determines or influences your capital allocation?
I mean, it's critical. It's probably one of the... Everything else, you could figure out whether it makes sense to do, you can do your spreadsheets and your analysis and everything else. But governance is number one, because if you don't have the right governance, it's highly unlikely that you're going to make a good return from that investment. You could be lucky and get away with it, but that's not the approach. So even when we talk about resilience and, do you have a board, not just that is making sure it's ticking the boxes and, okay, the accounts are done and everything else is done, but are they forward-looking? Are they sort of debating and challenging the company as to what's going to be the impact of AI on your business? We want boards that are engaged and that are focused on driving value and thinking of the shareholder, because we are not operators. We're not going to go in and help these companies in that way. We can help them strategically, but not operationally. And we need the right board and management team to do that.
Yeah. I know we've talked so much about AI, the green transition, that's kind of taken a backseat, ESG as well. So, I'm going to bring that up right now. And just the concerns that we're seeing, ESG funds, renewable energy stocks, have kind of fallen out of favor. We were pretty hyped in 2021, 2022. But that's changed a lot. And I wonder how Temasek is fine-tuning its path to net zero without taking its foot off the pedal. What does a credible transition plan look like today when many people are just backing away from early established goals and promises?
So I would say people are talking about it less, but a lot of companies haven't really abandoned their plans. Because for their own resilience, they feel that they need to be conscious of what climate change is going to do, the implication on their business. For our portfolio companies, we set a goal for ourselves in 2020 that we would reduce our 2010 emissions by 50% by 2030. So which meant going from 30 million tons of CO2 for our portfolio companies in 2020, it was supposed to come down to 11 million tons in 2030. As our portfolio has grown, we are down from that 30 to 21 million tons. So still a long way to go to get to the 11. And it's not going to be linear. It's going to get tougher from now on because we have an airline in our portfolio, and there's no obvious way to sort of decarbonize that right now. But we haven't abandoned what we want our companies to do. And our companies also realize that they need to do it for their own longevity and sustainability as such. Look, and we're playing a role in trying to make sure that that happens in the ecosystem too. So, for example, we set up a joint venture with HSBC called Pentagreen to basically finance marginally bankable projects and make them bankable, involving multilaterals like ADB, etc. And we financed 5 projects in the joint venture. One of them actually was done in November in Indonesia. And hopefully this is going to catalyze as these projects become successful, we can do things at a bigger scale. The MAS, through its FAST-P program, is trying to catalyze $5 billion to invest in the renewable transition as such. We are actively engaged in partnership with a couple of their projects out there. So we are engaged. The challenge here is, DBS has estimated that to be Paris-aligned, ASEAN will have to invest about $5 trillion in green projects by 2035. And right now, the visibility is only for about $1 trillion, so there's a huge gap. So the gap is enormous, but some of it is just going to be driven by commerce and what makes commercial sense. Like, for example, solar energy is now getting to be more competitive than any other form of energy. Now, you have issues about storage, so you need to address that. You have issues around transmission, they need to be addressed. But ultimately, these technologies and the greening will be adopted not just because it's a good thing to do for the world, but because it also makes economic sense for businesses. And there's a lot of work going on to make sure that that happens.
Yeah, and Rohan, I just want to squeeze in one more question, and I want to know what happens to the people caught in the middle of all of this, the people who are left behind. Because when you talk about the green transition, there are a lot of fears that it will create a new class of energy poor citizens. I mean, what is the business case for protecting the people who may be left behind? And if the green transition leads to social instability in the global south, then how does that impact the long-term value of your portfolio?
Look, I don't think you can ignore social factors when you're talking about the green transition. But so it's not saying let's shut down all the coal plants down right now, right? But as you saw in the earlier presentation, I mean, Indonesia is looking, I forget what the number, but it's something like 70 or 80% of incremental capacity is going to be solar. There is a small sliver out there which also saw there'll be some coal plants out there. But if it's needed to basically give people electricity where they cannot get it otherwise, you can't just say that, look, I'm going to ignore those people. So we've got to be practical. But as long as you're moving in the direction where bulk of the new capacity being set up is consistent with moving towards a greener world, I think we just have to manage that. And in some situations, you have the MAS that had initiated this process of the traction credits, which would say basically try and see if you can have credits given to companies to phase out coal earlier than otherwise, and then use those credits partly to support also communities that may be impacted by that. So we have to look at these things, but it has to be done practically, and we have to factor in social factors. And I don't think the two are incompatible. It just means that maybe you don't move as fast as you would otherwise if you did not have these social issues. But frankly, I don't think you can ignore the social issues.
Rohit, really, thank you so much for your insights. I mean, in a world that feels more uncertain every day, it's refreshing to hear that, long-term thinking and clarity of purpose still matters a lot. We would like to thank you again once more for your time. Rohit Sipahimalani, he is, of course, CIO at Temasek. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rohit. Thank you, Liz. Very refreshing indeed. You may return to your seats. It is very comforting. It is very rare to have all the three institutions in one event, right? We had Temasek, we had Danantara earlier, and now we're going to continue to learn more about investment landscape, especially from the sovereign wealth funds lens across Southeast Asia. I'd like to invite Mr. Hisham Hamdan. He's Chief Investment Officer of Khazanah Nasional, Malaysia's sovereign wealth fund, which will be accompanied by my colleague, Melissa Goh, our senior correspondent in KL. She's covered everything, every major event in Malaysia the past 2 decades, and I'm very proud to introduce both Mr. Hisham and also Mel Goh on stage for this fireside chat on catalyzing competitiveness, investment, innovation, and shared value for ASEAN.
Selamat pagi. Good morning, everyone. I know it's midday almost. It's so good to be here in Jakarta with the CIO on stage now with me, Mr. Hisham Hamdan. And as far as where I'm in Malaysia, things are looking pretty good, I must say. I don't know about you, because the latest economic numbers exceeded expectations, and even ringgit has also rebounded, and also all the trajectories are really on upward momentum as well. Now, Khazanah will be building on these positive momentum. Yeah. And as Chief Investment Officer, Mr. Hamdan, can you tell us more how you intend to navigate Khazanah's portfolios spanning some 20 business sectors across more than 20 countries, how you intend to navigate amid the geopolitical uncertainty and volatile trade policies?
Yeah. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, CNA. Pleased to be here. That's true. I think macro-wise, Malaysia and I think other ASEAN countries also have done well of late. Just looking at the market, last year, 2025 and 2024, ASEAN had done about almost 30+%. China as well, 50% over the last 2 years. But then again, if you look at ASEAN as a region or Malaysia as a region, I'm just going to use this hotel, the ballroom here. Concept hotel economy. We're busy here. The hotel owner actually don't capture much of the value. The booking.com, the trip.com capture most of the value. And the activities that we have here, the business transaction we do here, they don't capture. So the concern for a country like Malaysia is to make sure that we capture some of the value. Otherwise, GDP growth has been fantastic, 5-6% over the last 10 years, but the capital market return has been poor. So that's something about Khazanah. If we want to make sure we are fully diversified, we invest domestically and also overseas. I think the bulk of our portfolio is still domestic, where we need to invest. We need to reform, we need to fix them, we do the difficult thing with the Malaysia Airline or Malaysia Airport. At the same time, we benefit from our investment overseas. And Rohit mentioned about the Max 7, right? And I think most of the asset owners, asset managers, if you have US exposure, will benefit from Max 7, S&P 500. If you are in China, the DeepSeek, the last 2 years really propelled the A and H shares. Obviously, since 2021, it was difficult, and the last 2 years have been good. So ASEAN as well. And the question for us is, how do we capture value? Value creation is great, macro GDP, but do we capture enough of this value? I think those things, I'm using hotel economy as a concept. We do not want to be a hotel economy. We want to capture most of the value, whatever happening here, we need to capture. But that's how Khazanah and also maybe our friends Danantara and Temasek, and how do we rise together?
Well, Khazanah manages about $40 billion.
Thereabout.
In different asset classes. Is Khazanah planning to move more money back and invest in domestic market? Tell us, what is the percentage of investment currently in domestic market?
I think domestic will remain the majority of our portfolio. I think 60% thereabout. I mean, that's something that for Malaysia is the saving rates for the country is about anywhere between 27 to 30% of GDP, but the investment rate is still 23%, unlike the roaring 90s where investment as a percentage GDP about 30+%. So something that Malaysia has a lot of saving, but we need to continue to invest in the country. And Khazanah and through Malaysia Finance, the Gear Up policy together with our sort of friends, the EPF and PMB and QAP, we're making a conscious decision to invest in domestic sectors and whatever sectors that we want to invest, whether we talk about AI from power, data centers, and then the chips in Penang, and obviously then the platform and the application, those are not much. So that's something that we shows that, hey, the last 2 years of this AI, ASEAN country continually had to be nimble. Whether we go back 40 years ago or 500 years ago, that's something that we have to be agile and adjust to whatever the environment, the global environment.
Now, while creating value, as you mentioned, Khazanah is also looking forward to deepening partnership with both US and China in this dual-track partnership. Tell us, how do you navigate risk? Are you looking at rebalancing, recalibrating the balance?
Well, something that institution or country like Malaysia or ASEAN is not either or. That's always a stroke. We have to do both stroke and. Malaysia, US is number one investor in Malaysia, and China is number one export of our products. So we have to constantly deal with both. Not just now, back to 400 years ago. I'm from Malacca. Constantly, Malacca then 15th century connected China to the world, and constantly the world needed China products then, and now the world still needed China products. So how do we ASEAN then adjust? When the Plaza Accord in the late 80s, where Japan, relocate their supply chain here, some part of it we industrialize. When China got accepted to WTO 2001, our manufacturing got affected a bit, right? But when China launched the stimulus, 4 trillion renminbi stimulus in 2009, 2010, we benefited because this part of the world still supply commodity on top of the assembly manufacturing where we're not capturing enough value. So those are things that we constantly have to adjust. And given where China economy now, where they're struggling to increase the domestic consumption, where property no longer the driver of growth, our export to China will have to change. So when property was the bulk of consumption in China, we export a lot of commodities. Now, China have all this met in 2025, technology, those kind of things. So we also have to adjust in terms of how do we deal with China imports, So at the same time, US still very important. So we have to do both stroke and.
So both countries are pivotal.
Very, 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 very much.
At the same time, you also mentioned that ASEAN countries are very concerned about, China flooding our markets with cheaper products, right? And now they're coming into our services sectors as well. You see plenty of hot pots restaurants around, and you see them servicing our EV cars, and soon they'll be fixing our toilets and our plumbing services as well. So tell us your concern.
Well, I love the restaurant scene in Kuala Lumpur. Hot pot, Lanzhou Lamian, even Hunan food, and I love all kind of food, and definitely consumers have benefited. In the past, some of the low-end products, now increasing the higher end. The EV cars and all the technology. I go to China. I've been going to China for 22 years. I've seen the incredible progress of China. So the question is, while we love those things, it may affect our SMEs, our small companies, right, which may not be able to compete. But I see it's an opportunity as well, because China invests almost $500 billion on the R&D, roughly about 2.7% of their $20 trillion GDP. Think about it. The R&D alone is bigger than some of the countries in ASEAN. Obviously, Indonesia, 1.5 trillion. So there will be access technology, I call it rare alphabets. You know, if you play Scrabble, form words using rare alphabets, you get higher points. So these alphabets are available. EV companies, for example, roughly about 130 to 140 EV companies in China. Maybe 10 will survive. The hundreds of them will probably go under. Maybe the province, local province, is still helping them. So those are things that where we in ASEAN countries need to really have deliberate, intentional effort to bring some of this access technology and work with our companies so that we can move up the value chain. The problem for ASEAN is, if you think about smiley curve, think about Stanshire, talk about smiley curve, we are at the bottom of that smiley curve, where we do assembly, we don't capture the bulk of the value chain. That's why despite fantastic GDP, our capital market is still not there. Because the bulk of the value is captured the other end. The design, the technology, and also the platforms are captured at S&P 500 and NASDAQ. So ASEAN need to be very, very conscious about how do we get your company move up from value chain. And China using, automation, robotics, even that part of the value chain China is also going up. Obviously now they move up the left and the right. So it's something that ASEAN need to be conscious. Otherwise you can import the products, it'll affect your SMEs. But this, to me, is a great opportunity for ASEAN to move up the value chain, work with Chinese, work with some of the provinces. And I think in ASEAN, a lot of Chinese came from Guangdong and Fujian. Those are our natural hub where we can connect. On top of Beijing and Shanghai, Hangzhou, Suzhou, and Chongqing, all this kind of thing, right? So I think it's a great opportunity.
And investing in R&D is one way, as you mentioned. China, 2.7%. Malaysia, 1%. I think we invest less than 1% of GDP in R&D, and Korea is 5%, right? So lots to do on the R&D front.
But that's the whole point, right? Rather than reinventing, because if you don't have the talent, the money to invest in R&D, the alphabets, the technology will be available. Think about, is ASEAN, part of the whole Asia is one nation, like the US. The US, what, 27 trillion US dollar GDP? China 20, we are 4 trillions, plus South Korea. If we think in one region, no need to reinventing. Let's borrow, let's work together. China has fantastic universities, we heard about Beda and Tsinghua and Fudan and Jiatong, but think about Zhejiang in Hangzhou. Basically Alibaba is there, DeepSeek is there, and even in the south, in Shenzhen. Those are technology or alphabet that we can really work. No need to reinventing. If take a long time for our education, our university to change this R&D, use the existing R&D, apply them, and that's where we can progress. Let's do a shortcut on this thing.
The trick is creating the high-scoring words, right?
That's right.
How do you do that?
Well, again, do you have the alphabets, the Q, the X, and Y? If you have A, I, U, O, that's commodity alphabets. That's how you have become a price taker. You want to be a price setter. So if you don't have the alphabets, you either invent them, it take a long time, or use the alphabets from other countries, whether from Silicon Valley, from Hangzhou, whether from Suzhou, bring them here. Let's have a dedicated effort to bring them, because China, again, has access technology, access alphabets. Most of them are not going to be used. Let's have our country so that we can move from the bottom of the smiley curve and move to the right or move to the left. And that's how you can become a price setter. When you can sell a higher price, then you have margin, you have profit, you have return, and therefore you can pay your people better. That's how we should do it.
The next time I play Scrabble, I'm going to think of you and what you said. Okay, yeah. You mentioned about U.S. market. So do you see further upside, or you think a major correction coming?
So people always ask me all the time about U.S. market, but think about it. U.S. roughly about almost 25% of the world GDP, about $27 trillion, I think something like that. But they make up about 65% of the world index. I'm talking about public market, MSCI ACWI. Think about it, 3x of their GDP share, right? And their GDP grows the last 10 years, 2-3%, but the S&P 500, roughly about 15%. Think about it, which means their companies capturing more than the profit from overseas. As I said, Malaysia, for example, semiconductor, offset, whatever it is, we don't capture most of the value. Most of them capture S&P 500 or NASDAQ. So US, 65%. And look at China, roughly about 20 trillion, roughly about 16% GDP. But the percentage in global index only 3%. 3%, right? And emerging market is 10%, developed market 90%. Look at ASEAN. ASEAN, roughly about $4 trillion GDP. It's only 5-6% of the GDP, but only 1% of the MSCI ACWI index. Who else is 1%? TSMC alone equal to ASEAN. So think about it. You can talk about, hey, whether overvalue, undervalue, from 65% allocation the index, let's say you take 10%, you switch everything to ASEAN, or to emerging market, from 10% index become 20, you still have 55% in the US. So whether you like it or not, if you invest globally, the bulk of your return will have to come from the US. Therefore, whatever Trump do, whatever Congress do, will affect your portfolio. So you can't run away from it. You can tilt here, a bit here, a bit there, a bit here, a bit there, but US will remain the bulk of your portfolio for global investors.
I mean, speaking about a return, last year, Khazanah in 2025 paid the government 1 billion ringgit in dividend. Are you going to repeat that this year, you think, for 2025?
Well, I shouldn't speak because we have announced the result. Last year, we actually did really well, 24%. And this year, global market been good. And I think we'll see what's going to happen. Obviously, we have to make sure we give dividend to the government. We can invest in Malaysia. And, we'll announce it sometime next month.
Closer to home, Khazanah's exposure in Indonesia, and given the recent sell-off, how would it affect Khazanah's performance?
Indonesia, we are here, the biggest country in ASEAN with almost $1.5 trillion GDP. And I think Rohit mentioned earlier, we have to think long-term. And we are patient capital, sovereign wealth fund. Noises always there. We are invested via our companies, Axiata, through now XL and Smart, CMB, Versaniaga. We have our public market team here, also continue to invest in Indonesia. So will remain the important country for us. Again, as we said, some of these are noises. If you asset managers, because the index, you have to react. I guess for asset owners, we have the privilege of thinking long term. So something that Indonesia is a very important country for us in this part of the world. Yeah.
Now, this is widely said to be an ASEAN decade, or if not ASEAN century.
Yeah.
And competition is steep for talent, for, Mr. Rosan was saying about how important, but Rosan was saying that how important talent is to the country's economic growth, whether they made it or not, whether they make it in the plan, whether you can execute the plan or not, and also intense competition in terms of capital, intense competition of technology. How do you think ASEAN countries can collaborate? Yeah. And also some structural reforms that you think in order to bring in more investment into this part of the world?
I think there's excellent questions that constantly being asked, whether in Davos or Milken, about ASEAN. Bear in mind, we are $4 trillion GDP. Our market return is only about 5% thereabout, and US think 15%. India also $4 trillion GDP, but market have been fantastic, 12-30%. So we are really lacking in terms of return capital markets. What we could do is, one thing that we can do is, hey, how do we improve the capital market returns, right? Remember, 1% global ACWI equivalent to TSMC, which is insulting, actually. So how do we move from 1% of global ACWI to 3 or 4%, right? So the best way is improve the return of our companies, ROE, right? Or ROIC, margin, all those kind of things. So we need to ensure that our companies perform. Second is in terms of having one platform where ASEAN companies can invest together without going through 5, 6, 7 stock exchange. If we do that, company improve in terms of performance, and then we have one platform, valuation goes up. As a result, the return will go up, and then you have more money coming to this region, so it will reduce the cost of capital for investors coming in, if you want to do right issue, IPO or VC or private equity for them to cash out, they get better return. So that's the best way for us, I think, at least from my perspective. There are many, many things that we can do. How do we integrate capital markets? How do we reduce the friction of 5, 6 stock exchange into one, for example? Then that's how capital market can help national development by reducing the cost of capital for the young and small companies. Bear in mind, the problem with ASEAN is 40-50% of our index are banks. Banks making a lot of money, the non-bank not making enough money. And the banks tend to lend to big companies. So the smaller companies may not get proper capital, so we need to help them. The only way to help them is having a thriving capital market. Then you can have IPO, you can have small company getting listed, then you have new economy, so then how you change the beta of ASEAN. So problem with ASEAN is too many old economies, right? Maybe too many SOEs, but SOE is very important, too many entrepreneurs still investing in the old economy. So I think we need to change that. Yeah.
A lot of legacy issues.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's talk about strategic investment. Now, Khazanah, as a sovereign investor, has a dual role of growing the country's wealth and develop the economy at the same time. Now, give us some example in terms of catalysts that Khazanah has implemented over the years that has attracted both capital, talent, and tech.
You're right. So sometimes, you see the pension fund managers, they all have to worry about commercial return. You don't have to worry about it. We have to do both. And Rosan just now showed the Danantara mandates. I think if you look at Iskandar, the Johor Singapore, SEZ, and after the 1998 collapse, we got the land, the region has been issued. So Khazanah went in together with federal government. Federal government announced 10 billion ringgit of infrastructure. Khazanah bring in another 10 billion in terms of investment into the very sector, working with the state government, and also working with Singapore to a certain extent. And that's how we started. That was 20 years ago. Bear in mind, building a city takes a long time. So that 20 billion ringgit, if you look at the numbers, anywhere between 300 to 400 billion other investment coming in. That's how Khazanah, with federal and state, crowd in capital, whether domestic or foreign investment, into Iskandar. That's one example. Second example is right after 1998, when we have Asia financial crisis, 2001 to 2002, the government established this company called Value Cap, consisting of Khazanah, Co-op, our public pension funds, and also PMB. So we set up a fund. Basically, when the market was down at 600 plus, we bought the market and sit there and sort of a bit of a stabilizer and a shock absorber when the market sort of, investors are running away. And again, 2009, we raised another 5 billion, we bought the market, and then when the market stabilized, 2014, 2013, we liquidated, which I think pretty handsome profit. Those two roles, for example, where we also work with the private sector, we help the government. Another thing is 1998 again, where the non-UM was in trouble, a private sector. We privatized, we part of Khazanah, we own Plus and a bunch of other assets. So we do a lot of things on behalf of the country. We do difficult things, and increasingly, for example, we saw airport, we're bringing our partner. Malaysia Airlines connectivity is very, very important to us. I think we've said that publicly, semiconductor is one sector that we want to crowd in together with private sector. So constantly bringing private sector, we go in there, de-risk first, and then private sector can money. So one thing about sovereign wealth fund, if we don't capture most of the value creation we do, sometimes the private sector capture it in the form of jobs, in the form of private sector making more money, in the form of taxes government collected. So those are things that our role, working with many, many other stakeholders.
Right. For those who are not familiar, Iskandar is a predecessor of JSSEZ, Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone, which is more than 4 times the size of Singapore, isn't it? Yeah. And the government is coming up with an investment master plan later this month. Tell us, what can we expect?
In terms of the new master plan in Iskandar?
Yeah, there will be a master plan that I read that the economy minister will be releasing this master plan, GSSEZ.
Again, building a city takes more than 20 years, right? And then we constantly have to be agile against the flow of investment. You've seen Johor, a lot of data center, there's sort of overflow from Singapore. There are many, many clusters that we need to develop, and I wouldn't, that's up to the government to announce it. But very, very important, again, to remember that we do not want to be hotel economy. Data center is great, but how much of the data center we capture? Bear in mind the 5 layers of AI that we said, the power we can supply, data center, whatever it is, the chip, we still at the bottom, the offset, we need to more value chain. So going back to Iskandar, that's something that we have really been there for the last 20 years. Khazanah own a lot of lands there, and through 3 or 4 of our companies, and we are really poised to benefit for whatever economic activity is there. But we want to make sure that we capture the bulk of the value. Right.
Apart from GSSEZ, let's take a look at Malaysia Airport Holding or Malaysia Aviation Group, as well as Malaysia Airlines that managed to turn around in the last 4 years sitting in profit. What lessons can Khazanah draw from its investment in this strategic asset?
First of all, connectivity is important for a country like Malaysia, right? Where private sector normally do not want to invest in high-risk sector. And airline is an example where the customer capture the value. If you're a customer, you want to fly to London, 20,000 permutation how you can fly to London. Where supplier, Boeing, Airbus capture the value. So really, really intense competition. But as a country, owning national airline full-fledged is very, very important. So lesson learned is you need to support your national airlines, because it's a very, very difficult sector where the bulk of the value actually captured somewhere else, whether hotel, whether tourism, whether tech. So very, very important that someone stay there and keep on investing in Malaysia Airlines and providing that we have the right talent and continue to increase efficiency. Secondly, the airport, and we did that, right? So airport is very, very important that in order for other airlines also to fly into Malaysia. Because at the end of the day, it's about connectivity. So if you don't have full service courier, where the bulk of business class, where they make the money, so businessmen want to come to Malaysia, interaction between the two countries, or let's say the many cities of China, and that's where you learn about the technology, whether Shenzhen or Hangzhou or the Shanghai. So very, very important that the government need to continue to support the airlines. And from time to time, owning airline companies can be quite painful because, 600 to 1,000 airline companies around the world, and only maybe 10, 20 make money. So that's something that's what the roles of wealth fund for. Yeah.
Well, given that Malaysia Airlines is now finally making lots of money, will Khazanah be thinking of relisting Malaysia Airlines? Or MAG?
A decision to be made, but obviously we want to stabilize first, making sure that in a strong footing, we want them to make sure the hardware is good, and new planes being ordered, and that's something that we worry about it later. And we don't think short term. We think long term, making sure the airline is stabilized. That's very important.
Okay, the time is ticking. I want to go to my last question. If there's no questions from the floor, last opportunity. Nope. Okay. Let's end on a positive note. The ringgit. The ringgit has been strengthening, and the ringgit's is a top performing currency now in the region. How has a stronger ringgit impacted Khazanah's performance?
Well, it's a function of Federal Reserve interest rate. So after 2022, US dollar interest rate, the US interest rate went up. So obviously money went to the US. And now as they're trying to bring down the inflation under control, normally emerging markets will do well. And Malaysia, not just Malaysia. Many other countries, currency also has strengthened. Can be a double-edged sword, right? Because you want it to be gradual, because Malaysia is still a big exporter, whether our manufacturing products, whatever it is. So we have to be very careful that if too strong a currency, it will affect your products. But at the same time, it will help your imports and your deficit. So, when when ringgit weaken, the translation we will benefit. When it strengthen, we also benefit in other ways. We both end. It's not one way. No.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your interesting perspectives on CNA Summit here in Jakarta. Mr. Hisham Hamdan.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank
you, Melissa.
Melissa Goh and Hisham, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a quick coffee break. I know we talked about lanzo beef noodles and hot pots. It makes us hungry, but for now, we will serve drinks and some refreshments onto your
in
table.
Jakarta, Indonesia,
Thank
the
you so
theme
much.
is smart growth, navigating investment and innovation in the new era. My name is Yasmin Yonkers, CNA host, and this is my colleague Erickson.
I'm Erickson, your co-host. We just heard from Mr. Roeslani, Mr. Rohit, and Mr. Hisham about how to use more about the AI and make sure that the AI will be utilized fully for the smart growth in investing in different kind of the industry in Indonesia.
Yeah, I was just looking at my notes here, and forgive me if I have my phone out here, but I just want to recap a few things that Pak Rosan talked about on stage, Erickson. The fact that it was nice to hear him admitting that it's not easy for Indonesia to actually reach that 8% growth by the year 2029. He laid out the challenges very honestly, the minister, and he also talked about the achievements at Danantara, the investment arm that he heads as well. So plenty of conversations here in Jakarta at the Ritz-Carlton. We're very excited to be here in Jakarta for the first time. Okay, so we've got plenty more coming up, okay? This is what's going to happen. There will be a panel discussion, more live interviews here on this YouTube channel with business leaders and the heads of organizations. But before we move on to our next interview, allow me to take a moment to thank our partners for the CNA Summit 2026 main partner, Singtel.
It's not just a signal, it's your connection, plugging you into the safest, smartest city in the world. Whatever your new challenge, you are unstoppable with Singtel 5G Plus. You can keep pace, or you can set it. Race ahead with a new standard of connectivity and security. Whatever dream you're chasing, you are unstoppable with Singtel 5G Plus.
The CNA Summit. So, Erickson, take a look. The ballroom doors have just opened.
Yes.
And the guests, of course, have been seated for, what, 1.5 hours?
1.5 hours.
And they haven't been moving very much, but they've been listening to a lot of content. And I'm sure they're very happy to be out to have a coffee break.
Exactly, because now it's 12 o'clock.
Yeah, it's 12 o'clock. And soon there will be a nice lunch break as well. We have a live coffee stand here. Have you tried it? This iced coffee featuring Java beans, all the things that Indonesia wants to show off. Pak Rosan earlier also on stage talked about, tapping into geothermal energy. He talked about energy sources, and that's going to be part of the conversation that we'll be having here on the YouTube channel.
Yes, we are going to have a bit more chat about the payment system in Indonesia, and of course, energy also.
Yeah, energy, yeah. But okay, talking about payment system, good that you brought that one up. Ooh, something just banged there, excuse me. This is a ballroom and people are really moving around. There's a homegrown payment system here in Indonesia that has quietly reshaped the way that millions of transactions happen. This is the story of QRIS. Now, I was just told that it often gets mispronounced as QRIS, but it's actually Chris, well done. Here's a clip from a CNA bulletin on Asia Now about it.
It's everywhere, from air-conditioned cafes to street-side vendors. The Quick Response Code Indonesia Standard, or what Indonesians know as KRIS, has eased payments for anyone with a bank account.
Pastinya sangat memudahkan transaksi ya, karena kita tidak perlu menyiapkan uang cash dan juga tidak ada minimum payment juga biasanya.
Bagus ya, justru lebih gampang memudahkan buat kita sebagai pembeli sama pedagang juga lebih efektif kan buat ngecek kalau misalkan udah bayar atau belum.
Implemented nationwide in 2020, the system sought to facilitate payment transactions in a more convenient manner, turning cash payments digital and transforming local financial architecture.
You know the process. A consumer can scan a merchant's QR code using their mobile banking or e-wallet app to complete a transaction. The funds will then be transferred from the user's connected account to the merchant's account.
But in a global economic environment where payment systems have become a crucial battleground for influence, Indonesia's KRIS payment system challenges Western financial payment platforms with a localized counter-narrative. So much so that the US recently called out the system for being unfair in a national trade report on foreign trade barriers. Analysts say this signals a new era for Indonesia, presenting the opportunity to explore other partners.
I think it's good for Indonesia's balance of payments. It's also bring more inflow of the money, and for the business itself, whether small enterprise or big corporations can enjoy the QR because they're offering, for instance, less currency risks. Rather than converting to the US dollars, we can convert directly to any local currency as our counterpart.
According to the Indonesian Payment Systems Association, Visa and Mastercard credit card payment systems remain the preferred payment method for cross-border transactions. Credit card transactions in the country grew by 21% last year. The volume of KRIS transactions crossed 6 billion as consumers increasingly chose it for its greater efficiency.
Behind a simple QR scan sits a highly competitive and evolving payment landscape in Indonesia. There are banks, super apps, global platforms, and local wallets. They are all competing for relevance and trust in this very highly competitive market.
Yeah, let's explore this further. Derek Rochili is with us, Chief Innovation Officer at Dana Indonesia. Thank you so much for joining us, Derek.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's good to see you here at the CNA Summit. Have you had your coffee yet?
I did this morning. It was a huge lineup.
Yeah, but you didn't have to pay with a QR code.
No, not for here, for this one, no.
It's on the house today.
Thanks so much.
All right, I want to ask you, clearly the uptake from that video that we just watched is good for electronic payments. And Indonesia has many e-wallets. Many of them start with promos to get people to sign on. But once the promos fade, what are you doing, or at least what's the best way to keep the interest going?
So there's a couple of important things that we've noticed for the past few years. One is that people need to have trust when you're dealing with financial systems, payments, right? Because you need to know that your money is safe. So we have put a lot of focus on ensuring that we've built one of the most secure, trusted platforms in the market. So we have all of the major certifications like PCI DSS, ISO Information Security, and Security Scorecard, where we're regularly rated as one of the top safest apps in the market. And aside from trust, safety, we also need to make sure that the user experience is one of the better ones for the user, for the merchants. Because if your platform is clunky, it's unreliable, people are not going to come back and use it. We need to make sure that it's convenient for them to use, it's easy for them, it makes sense, right? So we focus a lot on user experience as well, making sure that the users are comfortable. Of course, at the beginning, you'll need to have some promos to attract people to use it for the first time, but then it becomes a habit. And when the habit comes, it's about the user experience, about the safety. And third is probably about the use cases that you have within the platform, right? We are trying to build a day-to-day digital financial app. So we need to have, things that people can use to pay every day, like KRIS that you mentioned, money transfers, where we are integrated with hundreds of banks and other financial institutions. And also we need to make sure that we're accepted at a lot of the merchants where we have over 1 million merchants, and through KRIS we are accessible at over 60 million merchants which accept KRIS throughout Indonesia. So I would say those 3 points would be very important.
Sure. Of course, Dana is one of the players, and in this Indonesian market we have so many things that are your conventional banks, super apps like Grab, and another global players, Revolut, they also come to the picture. Where does a local wallet like Dana truly win, and where does it struggle?
I think local knowledge is a powerful thing, and we have really focused on understanding our users, our merchants, our partners, and there are certain nuances in Indonesia which probably gives an advantage to players, local players such as us, right? Understanding that, oh, Dana users do money transfers every day or every other day, but in small amounts, right? Where globally, maybe people in bank countries will use their cards or they will use some other method of doing this, right? But in Indonesia, we need to make sure that we understand what our merchants need. So, for example, the Chris you mentioned, the merchants in Indonesia are looking for same-day settlements because they live day by day. We need to understand that not all global players... Every rupee counts, right? So it matters. Therefore, we have to build products that tailor to our users, to our merchants in Indonesia. So that's, I think, a critical component. And we have the benefit of being in Indonesia. We're serving Indonesians, and therefore we understand the behavior. And I think there are, of course, some challenges as we grow. It becomes... how can we make sure that we're growing properly, securely? Global governance systems come into play, right? How do we make sure that we adhere to strict governance, strict rules, etc. when we are growing? So I guess that's the benefit, is that we have the local knowledge. The challenge coming up is the more you grow, the more global standards of best practices we need to implement, and that's where we have to become more strict and adhere to all these best practices.
Okay, yeah. Derek, earlier we had the CEO of Singtel Singapore talk about the use of AI, and everybody talks about AI, I know, but he particularly focused on AI catching the scammers in the telco world, at least blocking them, to protect the customers. Talk to us about how AI is used in your space, and how else can it be applied in the e-wallet landscape?
So a couple of things come to mind. I think fraud prevention, risk management is one area where AI has really helped us. It's I think very easy for AI to start detecting unusual patterns, right? Whereas a human might take some time to analyze and learn. But with AI, this can be a very efficient way of detecting all these anomalies and patterns. Therefore, it will help us in our risk management, in our fraud prevention, and God knows in financial technology and payments, there's a lot of that going on. So it definitely helps us there. The other part is, I think, what everybody's also doing, right? Managing customer experiences, customer support, because a lot of the questions or a lot of the issues are technically quite easy to solve, but usually before we needed to have a human to answer all these questions. So with AI, we can really empower our chatbot to learn what kind of issues is happening and solve it by using AI, right? We've deflected about 95% of our issues by using this, right? So it helps our customer support team become more efficient. Aside from that, I think personalization is very important. AI can understand, millions of users' behaviors and then tailor the experience more easily than, us having to define the logic one by one. And I think that's for typically the external part. Internally, we have used AI. We have this Dana AI Everywhere initiative. So everybody in Dana needs to have an AI agent to help them in their day-to-day lives. And it has definitely helped improve the efficiency. So a lot of the manual tasks can be automated, can have a smart AI to handle it. So it allows our engineers, our creative team, everybody, our business team to gather insights more quickly, and everybody can just focus on more strategic or more creative matters, right? So it has a lot of benefits, although I'm going to say it's not gonna take your jobs, not, because there still needs to be human in the loop to help govern, to help take a look at the ethics, to help look at the data that's being fed to the AI. What is your AI being trained on? Because garbage in will be garbage out.
Sure.
So you need to make sure that the AI is trained properly, there's proper governance, there's ethics considerations, right? And so I think the huge efficiencies that has resulted from AI, but also that we still need people in the loop to help train.
I like the way you put it, because I feel that AI has just helped us understand what it's like to be really human and to discover our superhuman strengths. It's nice talking to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, and it's great being in your city here at the CNA Summit.
Thank you for visiting us. Great talking to you guys.
Derek Rochili is Chief Innovation Officer at Dana Indonesia here at the CNA Summit in Jakarta. Okay, so when traditional sectors struggle to create enough jobs, people adapt in different ways, and in some communities that adaptation is through digital platforms.
These are not large corporations, but individuals using accessible tools to create new sources of income and opportunity.
Okay, well, you know what? We are going to be speaking with a guest before we actually get to this next video that we were potentially going to go to. In fact, the guest is already here, and we're going to be talking about energy transition, very much linked to what Pak Rosan was talking about on stage earlier. Joining us now to share his perspective is Adam Salter from Greenvolt Power Indonesia. Adam, thank you for joining us here at the CNA Summit. Just want to ask you, you've had a rebrand recently. What was that about?
Thank you very much. Yes, we did, just the other day. We've been here for about 4 years now, operating under what was called Emerging Solar Indonesia. But we've now transitioned to the mother brand, which is Greenvolt. Greenvolt is operating in 20 countries across the globe, and we're actually 100% owned by KKR. So it provides us, if you like, not just the brand, but the long-term commitment when it comes to capital to be here and carry out what we're focused on.
Okay, congratulations. I hope it helps you.
Yeah. Congratulations again for your rebrand. Indonesia talks a lot about energy transition, and of course Minister Rosan just mentioned this big topic. But the infrastructure often lacks. From your perspective as an investor, which infrastructure gap matters most right now for unlocking the large scale of investment in this country?
Yes, I think it's fair to say there's a gap, and this is always common across the other markets that we see. Here in Indonesia in particular, we're focused on distributed generation, solar, so generating energy at the source and working with the industrial ecosystem. Now, when we talk about gaps, what we're seeing things hold projects back, in particular, are, if you like, efficiencies around permits and licensing. It takes time, and so what that obviously does, it delays the build of a lot of projects. In addition, you're also looking at maybe a lack of clarity around timeframes, and also this is also a market where there's still an education needed with regards to the clients in terms of what is actually the business value of transitioning to renewable energy, not just the compliance from an ESG perspective.
Sure. Adam, just one last question before we go back to the summit, because I know people are out for coffee break and they're going to be popping back in. Fossil fuels, right? The story of fossil fuels. Indonesia relies still heavily on coal and gas. Where does that fit in with your vision?
Well, I think, you know, the discussion is about managing the transition, right? And fossil fuels needs to support that, but it shouldn't define the future, right? So in that sense, we have to be pragmatic. Right now, reliability, affordability, security still matters, right? However, it should not define the future. And so when you think about what we're doing with solar, it's not going to compromise those elements. So it needs to be done in tandem. And I think when you really look at the future, also given the presentations this morning, the very encouraging presentation by Danantara, there's clearly a support from the government level as well.
Okay, we're about to go back to the CNA Summit in the ballroom. Thank you very much, Adam Salter, for your time here at this YouTube live studio that we have here in Jakarta at the Ritz-Carlton. Let's go back, and you know, coming up, it's a panel discussion from capital to advantage, investment and innovation in practice. Olivia Marzuki will be leading it along with her bevy of guests. We'll get to that right now.
Thank you. Now I can go drink.
It's not just a signal, it's your connection, plugging you into the safest, smartest city in the world. Whatever your new challenge, you are unstoppable with Singtel 5G Plus. You can keep pace, or you can set it. Race ahead with a new standard of connectivity and security. Whatever dream you're chasing, you are unstoppable with Singtel 5G Plus.
CNA Summit 2026. In a world racing toward the next frontier of opportunity, smart growth matters more than ever. Join global and regional leaders as they examine how investment and innovation drive long-term competitiveness in one of the world's most dynamic markets. Gain a high-level look at how Indonesia attracts quality capital and converts it into sustainable advantage across the archipelago. Discover where global capital is moving, what builds investor confidence, and how organizations turn strategic investment into real impact through the execution lessons shaping Indonesia and the region. The CNA Summit 2026, coming to Jakarta for the very first time on 5th February. Brought to you by MediaCorp. Main partner, Singtel. Hello Possibilities.
And it's a joyous Thursday here at the CNA Summit at the Ritz-Carlton in Jakarta. My name's Yasmin Yonkers, and this is my co-host Erickson.
I'm Erickson from CNA.ID.
Yeah, you know, Erickson just now, Olivia, who's going to be managing a panel in a moment, was on stage talking about CNA.ID, and she presented a video as well. How proud are you about the milestones that CNID has gone through before a relaunch from what I see in March?
Yeah, I'm very, very proud. CNID was launched first time on 11 March 2024.
Yeah, and you've been an editor since.
Yes, I joined the company a few months before that. As a founding
editor,
founding fathers of the website.
I'm sure we're going to catch that video again. But for now, let's head back to the ballroom here at the CNA Summit, where the big panel's about to begin. So enjoy.
Bapak Ibu, tamu hadirin yang terhormat, bagaimana kabarnya hari ini? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to CNA Summit 2026. If I can get everyone to return to their seats, please. We're going to keep this momentum going. We will continue our panel discussion. The last one for today, before we go to lunch. I know everyone's hungry. All right, so from capital to advantage, investment and innovation in practice. That is the big theme of our next panel session. And I feel that it's a very timely discussion because the debate now is not whether or not capital exists, it's whether it translates into real life and smart growth. Mastercard's Economic Outlook 2026 continues to frame Asia Pacific as a relative peace and resilient region, with Indonesia being one of the top bright spots. It's supported by strong consumer demand, resilient economy, travel, spending, and also rapid digital adoption and AI. On the other hand, we cannot ignore the recent noise that we've heard from the IDX, the stock market turbulence. And that just reminds us how quickly sentiment can change. So it begs the question whether investor sentiment actually a reflection of the real economic fundamental. Before I ask this question to my panel, I'd like to do a little check, a pulse check on your sentiment. So I'd like to see a show of hands, please. My question to you is, how confident are you with this year's investment climate in your respective industry? I repeat, how confident are you for the investment climate in Indonesia this year in your respective industry? Give me a show of hands if you're very confident. I'd like to see the confident people. Oh, okay. Seems like you're a minority, sir. All right. Those of you who are neutral, on the fence, not optimistic, not too pessimistic. Okay, some of you. All right, now. So the rest, I presume you are on the pessimistic side. Can I see show of hands? Those of you who are not very confident at all for this year's investment climate in your respective industry. Don't be shy. You can raise your hands. Yeah, I'm not going to name names. Looks like we have a majority of pessimists in this room. So we would like to hear from our panel now, and I'd like to invite them on stage. Please welcome Mr. Ng Tian Chong, Chief Executive Officer, Singtel Singapore, Mr. Hans Patuwo, Chief Executive Officer, GoTo. Last but not least, Ms. Aileen Goh, Country Manager and President Director for Indonesia, at Mastercard. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Live audience, you're welcome to submit your questions. If you haven't done that already, we have the Pigeonhole QR code, and you can submit your questions to our panelists. Please have a seat. Hello, Hans, Tian Chong, and Aileen. Another round of applause, please, for our panelists. All right, so we've seen the room earlier. They're pretty split, but we've seen a bit more on the bearish side. What does this tell you about the sentiment of investment climate in Indonesia? I'd like to hear a yes or no question. This is just a quick fire round of questions from each one of you. Starting from Aileen, ladies first. How do you see this panning out? A yes or no? Are you still confident that Indonesia is a good place to invest in?
Yes.
Good. Hans?
Yes.
Okay. Tian Chong?
Yes, because we're here for the long run from a Singtel perspective.
All right. Okay, please do elaborate your answer from a Singtel perspective. We'd like to hear from you first.
Well, from a Singtel perspective, a successful partnership is where we bring global expertise to combine with local insights. And our partner here, Telkom, we've been here decades, since the early 90s. And I believe for us, since we're a telco, it's about building long-term infrastructure, the mobile network, fiber, digital platforms. And over time, the topic of the day is converting dumb pipes to smart pipes with AI. And so we're here for the long term, and with Indonesia's tremendous opportunity in the demographics, the resources here, so yeah, it's a resounding yes for the long term.
A resounding yes, and another yes from you too, Hans. And yeah, would you like to elaborate on your yes answer?
Sure, absolutely. So we in GoTo, we are a consumer business, and despite some of the news that has roiled the capital markets last week, we believe the fundamentals of Indonesia has not changed. Maybe a few points to call out, right? Number one is we have a very fast-growing fintech business. And the fact that there are 100 million Indonesians who are either unbanked or underbanked does not disappear with last week's headlines. And our financing business and lending business continues to do well. At the same time, we have an on-demand business. We have food delivery, we have ride-hailing, and 280 million Indonesians will need to continue to consume. As was shared earlier by Pak Rosan, the consumption part of the Indonesia GDP is more than 50%. It was 53% as shown by Pak Rosan earlier today. So that part of the GDP will continue to be there, and we will be there to serve it. So the TLDR, from our point of view, is that while, yes, there are some headlines about the capital markets last week, the fundamental economics or attractiveness of the consumer market in Indonesia for us remains unchanged.
Aileen, we chatted earlier. You said you're here for the long game as well.
So I think I'm very privileged to be able to say yes to Tian Chong's answer and yes to Hans' answer, so all of the above. I think as a technology company, we are absolutely here for the long term. There is no doubt that Indonesia is going to be a powerhouse as far as the digital economy is concerned. And Mastercard's view has always been that we follow the government's vision, we work with industry to scale that vision, and then we have talent. We build talent to sustain that vision. And I think, at least from my perspective, we've been very encouraged by the vision that's been set up by the Bank Indonesia here with their payment systems blueprint. And I think in working through industry partners like the ones we have on stage, we're very, very hopeful, together with, I think, President Prabowo's view in terms of talent development, that I think Indonesia is the place to be for the long term.
All right, so I'm going to pick back on your economic outlook, which we talked about on CNA, the Mastercard Economic Outlook 2026, painting Asia-Pacific as a very resilient region, with Indonesia being one of the powerhouses. Has your outlook changed at all? Is there a tinge of cautiousness at the start of this year?
Well, Olivia, you asked a very difficult question, and you picked on the word resilience, which I think is layered. And my view on resilience at the end of the day is, when you think about the strategy that a company in the technology business has to make, and when you have to build for the long term, your assumptions really matter. And when we develop a strategy, we develop a strategy for this view. If everything changes, what remains universally true? Because the fact of the matter is, unless you are prepared to operate and invest in a market where things change all the time, you're not really investing. And our view has always been, when we develop a strategy, you have to think about what remains universally true in a country like Indonesia if everything changes. And for us, we've been very fortunate. The one thing that does stay true in at least our business is the concept of trust, and how uniform standards and the best-in-class technology reinforce trust, because it's not just about the payment, it's about trust. And we've been making those investments. So that doesn't change. Our view, therefore, on investing in the things that we've built do not change. There is a little bit of this and that, to your point, belok kiri, belok kanan, but we'll figure it out. And I think that's really my perspective.
Aileen, and the rest of the panelists, another quick fire round, yes or no question for you. Does the market noise reflect any truth to the fundamental of economic projection in Indonesia, yes or no?
Yes.
Hans?
There's a benefit of sitting in the middle,
Tian Chong?
Yeah.
To me, I think it's a no.
Okay. Why is it no?
I think market noise, if I look beyond Indonesia, there are a lot of different market noise now because of different factors, geopolitics, local development and all. But the underlying business potential and some of the things that my industry is in, that there are a lot of opportunities to build on. So the market noise are transient, and I think the mid to long-term opportunities are still there that we're being worked on. And market are being repaired in some industries, especially like mine, and I think those are some green shoots we hold on to.
All right. Hans, in this volatile environment, your answer was neither yes or no.
I tend to, I guess from my point of view, I think that there are two parts, right? If I think about the operational side of the business and the fundamentals of the country and the economy, I truly believe that not much has changed. The GDP continues to hum along. Their consumers, as I mentioned, remains a very big part of Indonesia GDP. And the fact that many of our services are still highly underpenetrated in Indonesia compared to similar economies in other parts of Asia shows that there is still room for growth. On the other hand, though, I do feel that there is a greater need to communicate much clearer and be much more articulate to preserve and in some cases upgrade the trust. There is a lot of news, and I think on the one hand, while we remain very excited and the fundamentals have not changed, it does mean that we have to put on an extra effort to communicate what we believe and why we believe what we believe than prior to last week.
All right. Aileen, your answer was a yes. So do you really think that market sentiment is a true gauge or indicator of the real fundamental of economic growth in Indonesia?
There's a lot of, I think, the business that we are involved in that is dependent on consumer optimism and business optimism. So obviously when the markets get a little bit shaky, you will feel a flutter of that, I think, in terms of what the short-term view could look like in terms of the prognosis. I think for us, it's not a function of how much we invest, it's how quickly we invest, if I have to say, because there is a little bit of that. And so I think that was where the yes came from.
Okay, picking back on that quickness, that nimbleness, do you think moving quick matters more than getting it perfect? Yes or no?
Good question. I actually read a quote recently which said some markets will reward you for moving fast, other markets will reward you for just being very patient.
Staying pat. All right.
So I think it's a balance of both, but I think with Indonesia, given the size and the prospect, this is the long game, so it's really about being patient.
Hans, what about you? Do you think it's better to move fast or to stay cautious, on the cautious side?
From a capital markets point of view, I will say definitely we should be taking a through cycle long-term view. Right? From a microeconomics company point of view, we definitely need to be moving fast in terms of delivering innovation and technology to our customers.
I couldn't agree more with Hans. I think for us in the tech space, you have to move fast. You have to also fail fast, learn fast if there's any failure, and be able to quickly adapt and move on, especially in the world of AI, where every 2 weeks we see some new solution showing up, where what was impossible becomes possible. And we have to work with people. We work with different types of people in our industry. Those who understand the business fundamentals, but also those who can imagine the art of possible. And so if you don't move fast, you will not be able to capture some of those opportunities.
What was possible now that was not possible this time last year?
Right. So one area that's interesting, since you asked the question, I'll say that, let's say, take the area of scams. In my business, it's a serious topic, and I think a lot of governments are working with the local operators to combat the increasingly sophisticated bad actors who have a high degree of sophistication. They use AI tools as well. So with AI tools and machine learning, we're able to do things now really quickly because we are training the model. And at Singtel in Singapore, we're blocking, on the average, about 10 million scam calls and SMS messages every month. It used to be 30 million, but it's 10 million now because of, one, effectiveness, but second, also the bad actors are changing their modus operandi to other ways. But that's one area where we see improvement, and I think without that, it is a tough battle.
So that's where you see the importance of staying nimble, especially in your industry, which is also going to point to your direction, Hans, here. GoTo and all its digital innovation, it just keeps growing, and we see that these bad actors, they're also equally fast. Sometimes they outpace the industry, they outpace the regulators. How do you tackle that?
So maybe allow me to add a few points, right? So going back to the earlier point about moving fast, right? We have an internal discussion, internal saying in GoTo, where we say velocity is life, right? So a point to note here is not speed is not life, right? Velocity is life. What's the difference, right? Velocity is a vector, right? It is speed multiplied by direction. So we just need to make sure that we are moving in the right direction as quickly as possible. Okay, then my teams always question me, right? Like, how do we do that? How are we sure we're going to be right or wrong? What bets do we take? What investments do we make? And so which my answer is, I'm not expecting our teams to be 100% correct. Right? In that case, either they are way too slow because we've overanalyzed it to death, or they have some divine powers which should not be discussed. But what I do tell my teams is that I expect you to be very clear, because I would rather that we be clearly wrong. An investment that we make is clearly wrong, and we do it quickly, and we realize quickly, very fast, that we're wrong. But because we're clear, we know what adjustments to make. Versus where you may have an investment that pan out, but because we're not really clear, we're not able to replicate it. So coming back, I feel that the main point here is we need to have the right direction and then just move as fast as possible. Velocity is life. While at the same time, in order to make that a reality, we have to be able to deal with some ambiguity. And it's okay not to know the answer, as long as we are clear what we are testing. So between those two philosophies, then we try to make sure that we outsmart the scammers. It is a very consistent challenge for us, and I'm happy to say that after 4 or 5 years, we have built up sufficient technological muscle to do that, to combat that. They are getting more and more sophisticated, deep fakes and etc. We have our own models as well. And our models, when we first came out with them a few years ago, were probably 50-60% accurate. But now, after multiple years of investment, have gotten to the point where we feel relatively comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans. Eileen, no industry is immune to these cyber threats. The financial industry is especially at risk.
So we've been tracking the progress of scams, I think, for almost a decade now. And we're actually one of the founding members of the Global Anti-Scam Alliance in the world. And I'm very pleased that I'm the co-chairman for the Global Anti-Scam Alliance here in Indonesia. So this is something that we started last year. We're very proud of. It's an industry effort. One thing I think I wanted to answer a question that you asked, which was, what is the one thing that we can do this year that we couldn't do last year? We see the unassailable momentum around agentic commerce. So one of the things that we do talk about in terms of AI is we're fairly certain, regardless of how AI changes, whether there is a boom or a bust in the capital markets, your ability to buy something through an agent is here to stay. And I used to spend a lot of time in Singtel in a previous lifetime. So I'll use a mobile phone analogy in terms of how we think about technology. If you think about the mobile phone device that's just about released, the new ones, you might find that their features are kind of only incrementally different, not very different from the last version of the handphone. But if you look at the mobile device versus the one that you had 5 years ago, it is completely different because all technology companies will build 5 to 10 years for the future. So one of the things that I think we've done, and this is just in the last 90 days or so, is we've released a set of standards for payments to be made through agents or bots to make them safe in the event that the bot hallucinates or is hijacked, because we believe that 5 to 10 years from now, that's the technology that's required to keep people safe, in addition to the scams that we see in the world today.
For the benefit of those who are not familiar with agentic AI, can you give us a real-life example of what these tools can do to make your lives easier?
Oh, I wish I had a demo here because it's pretty cool. But I think imagine for a minute that you are talking to your chat bot in, let's say, ChatGPT, and you're saying, hey, I'm planning a trip to China, Shanghai, 14 days with my family. Could you please propose an itinerary for me for this budget? ChatGPT goes away, comes back, and has an itinerary for you of suggested hotels, train rides that you could take, places you could visit. And then it will say, would you like us to book some of this for you? And you'll say, yes. Now, in that world, you would have your card securely stored in your application, and it would go ahead and make these bookings for you. Instead of you having to do it yourself. And if you've been designing your own itineraries today on generative AI, you'll understand what I mean. So it's only a small step away. The challenge we have, and this is very similar to when we first encountered scams, is that AI does a few things which we've never seen any technology do. It can hallucinate. So you might want to book a trip to Shanghai. It now books a trip to Singapore. And then no one's quite sure who was responsible for that because in the middle, the AI hallucinated. The second thing is AI can be hijacked. So it is susceptible to nefarious prompts, and it can be hijacked, and it can do something that you didn't tell it to do. So again, there is now the sense of what is a trusted bot, and can we tell if the bot did something on behalf of you that you didn't want? And all of these are payment standards and layers of trust technology that a network like Mastercard is building.
All right. Hans, you mentioned something about aiming correctly before you pick up on the speed. Where exactly is your direction for the next 12 months from now?
So I think for us, it is about building capabilities versus reusing or procuring somebody else's capabilities and offering it to our consumers. I was very inspired by some of the speakers earlier today. I tell you, I will never look at Scrabble the same way again. Yeah, terima kasih, Bapak. What I picked up was that those power tiles, right? The tiles with like the Qs and the X, those represent capabilities. And if I go back to the discussion with Pak Rosan and what he talked about, combining all of the ability to issue licenses and doing it on the spot in one place, that's a capability. So we're starting to think about GoTo as what are the capabilities that we need to invest in. Right? Invest is not just money, but it's also technology and scarce talent. And my hypothesis is that there are only 4 or 5 core capabilities that we should be investing in. And in most large companies that have been successful, their investments in 1 or 2 core technologies is what made them to be very big. So it's not trying to invest in 50 capabilities. So one example, so ByteDance is our partner. Right? We co-own Tokopedia with ByteDance. And it is very fascinating to understand a bit more of the history. Way back when, Google, their mission in life was to catalog all the world's information, index and catalog all the world's information to make it searchable. What ByteDance tried to do way back before it was even called ByteDance, they were not trying to solve their problem. They were trying to give you the recommendation of whatever information that you wanted, right, before you had to search for it. And from that base capability, the ability to predict what you want, they created, at first it was text, then it was short videos, and then the rest is history. So really then, in my mind, what are the 4 to 5? I don't think a company like GoTo can do more than that. We're not that big yet. What are the 4 to 5 investments in core technologies, right? That is not like something that we rebrand or rebuy, but something that we build in-house. That these are the 4 to 5 things that will be the engine of growth for many, many years to come.
All right. Building up on building capacity and capabilities, Tian Chong, you did mention that Singtel is an enabler of AI, and digital infrastructure takes years to pay off. I'd like to ask you, which AI-ready networks or data centers that actually are generating real value for enterprise returns, and which are still speculative?
Okay, that's a really big question. Okay, from Singtel perspective, we have 3 roles to AI for the context setting. We are a user of AI. In my case, I run the telco in Singapore. We're a big user, in fact, leading the AI transformation in Singtel at the moment. But we are also a builder of AI. We have a sister company called NCS, and we build AI in Singapore. And we are an enabler of AI. And that's where the infrastructure is built, where we have a company, Nexera, which is building data centers in Singapore, in fact, Indonesia as well, in Batam and Southeast Asia. And again, I think the thought that comes to my mind is, first of all, the value from these AI-ready infrastructure, be it the networks, our 5G network, the fiber, or the data center. What it does is, immediately with this AI-ready infrastructure, you get bigger bandwidths, you get a smart pipe, you get lower latency, you get scalable compute. And when you put that together, for companies who are working on use cases in AI, you get to immediately produce, right, and start seeing your productivity, your energy optimization start to happen, in those use cases. So the discussion a lot is, the companies have to think a lot about, if you do the AI transformation, there are different things to work on. The infra is just one part of it. In my AI journey at the moment, there's generally speaking 3 big stacks my team and I are working on. One is around the use cases, and there are multiple use cases across the company. Another is around the central kitchen, the tech stack. And then the third one, which is not being discussed, but I think is equally important because it can be a showstopper, is actually the workforce transformation, right? So you can have the best AI-ready data center, but if your multi-generation workforce cannot evolve with your AI evolution, that's a showstopper, right? So I think that's a big topic that we are equally working on at Singtel. How do we bring along a culture shift, a mindset shift, the AI training awareness in a multi-generation workforce as we work the use cases? So that is another part.
We're talking about talents and the people operating the AI tools.
We're talking about talent awareness so that people can deal with the topics of you are not at the moment, you are more likely to be replaced by a human who's trained on AI tools than the AI itself. So please help yourself to get trained. We're talking to the HR manager about redesigning the organization, because in the next 1 to 3 years, the org chart will change. We're going to have a manager looking after humans and virtual agents. So at that time, I asked my HR manager, what would the job be scoped like? Today, you have director, vice president, senior vice president. Jobs are scoped for big companies based on size and complexity. But tomorrow, in a flatter organization, how are you going to scope that? And we have to start thinking about that, because I'm going to have a colleague who say, hey, boss, I have 50 humans reporting to me. That chap has 100 virtual agents and 2 humans. Why is he a senior? I'm not. So how do we answer those questions, right? So I think we are working on a bunch of topics, while the AI-ready infrastructure is really important, but we really need to think about these other topics as well. They accompany the transformation.
Aileen, you spoke about agentic AI. How is this impacting career progression of people in the industry, for example?
Well, I'm still recovering from the fact that, I have a 19-year-old son, and he could be one of the 2 humans next to the 100 bots in Tian Chong's organization. Look, it's here to stay. We firmly believe that AI really augments what human beings can do. And I think that's really the path that we're taking in terms of talent development. We have no doubt that the future of work and the future workforce will look quite different. But at the end of the day, our focus is really the talent we have now and how to get them to be ready for the world that we need to operate in. And I think that's really how we're thinking about it. That said, though, AI is, I think, highly used in terms of raising productivity, training, engagement within an organization, because we do operate across 210 countries and territories. So we use technology a lot, I think, to keep the organization connected.
All right. So we would like to hear from you. What are your burning questions? I do hope that, ladies and gentlemen, in the live audience, you've submitted your questions to our pigeonhole. Oh, yes, you have. So I'm going to pick the most popular questions. How do I go about this? There are a couple of good ones. I'm having trouble reading small fonts, but lucky I have my iPad here. All right, so I'll pick one that says, Indonesia is a huge market. Has Singtel considered investment in Indonesian telco market directly or indirectly? I believe this is directed to you, Tian Chong.
Well, that's an easy answer. We are invested already in Indonesia, and we've been here since the early 90s with Telkom, and we operate Telkomsel together. We are the largest minority shareholder here, but certainly Indonesia is an attractive market, and that's why we've been here for decades.
All right. Thank you for that. I hope it answers the question. Next one is for Hans. GoTo's next strategic plan. Core business remains stable. Stock and investment and investor sentiment have tanked badly. What are the key actions needed to recover towards the original IPO price level?
Thank you for the question. I suspected something like this would come up, and I wish I had an AI agent to answer that for me.
I'm sure you've rehearsed this with the team.
Oh, but kidding aside, no, I think thank you very much for the question. I'm just going to address it head on, right? I think first of all, the fundamentals of the business we believe is pretty good. Don't take my word for it. I mean, if we look at the financial earnings, quarterly earnings for the past year in 2025 compared to 2024, there has been a significant improvement in our profitability. I think the core businesses remain growing, both in terms of users, in terms of GTV, as well in terms of profitability. Having said that, whoever asked the question, I do acknowledge, right, there has been several filters from the core fundamental business performance to the share price. I wish I knew what it would take to get the share price back up to its original level. And if you have any ideas, I am all in for it. But in terms of actions that we do need to take, I think there are three. Or I should say we are taking. I think there are three. I think first of all is we need to continue to do well on the fundamental business. If that is not doing well, then I don't think there is much to be discussed, right? So we are continuing to focus on investments into systems, into what we can do to meet the needs of our customers. I think that's very, very important. And the second thing that we need to do is also to understand and rethink our social contract with Indonesia and with the public. Again, going back to the level of trust, with the public. We have 3 million drivers registered. We have about 1 million active every month. We have 300,000+ GoFood, small and medium-sized businesses in our food delivery platform. We have almost 1 million merchants on our payments app, and so on and so forth. So we do need to make sure that we provide for the larger population and that there is a sense of trust in a way that is financially sustainable, right? When our drivers and our partners do well, then we do well. So that is, I think, very fundamental to continuing to build on the social contract and increasing the trust with society at large. I think last but not least, when it comes to investor trust, I think it's very important that we continue to do two things. One is be transparent, and two is be consistent. Right? Investors are very sophisticated, as we heard earlier today. Investors will make up their own minds and their own decisions on whether we are a good investment or not, and what will happen to the share price. It is our prerogative, right, to make sure that we communicate well, we communicate transparently, and we communicate consistently. And it is our hope, it's my hope that as we continue to do that over time, the filters of the noise then comes down, and the signal to noise ratio then becomes stronger. Thank you.
All right, feel free to speak more to Hans during lunchtime to get a follow-up.
Thanks, Olivia.
But thank you for the question, KF. All right, my final question is for Aileen. It comes from the audience. How can investors achieve long-term certainty in Indonesia when regulations can change mid-cycle and implementation often differs between central and local governments?
Thank you for that very easy question. Nice one to end off. Look, resilience, business resilience, I think, and I was speaking to my team yesterday, is a bit of a team sport. And I've operated in some what I consider to be fairly complicated markets. Indonesia obviously is right at the top of the list. I think it's important to stay close to your partners because you need to be listening out for signals. I think there are a lot of different signals. There's a lot of noise. And it's imperative. I like, Hans, what you said about being clear. But one of the hardest things to do for a business leader is to be very clear in the face of all this information and all this noise. But I think listening very closely and all the signals and trying to figure out what that truth is, I think is quite important. Partnering, I think, for us, we have what I would consider to be a very strong global template for success. But partnering, I think, for that local relevance, that local muscle, and having the right partners that help you be domestically relevant are very important, I think. So I think it's about listening, and it's about picking the right partner. And the last thing I will say is, because we're here for the long term, it is important, I think, for us to have a different kind of scoreboard or scorecard when we're measuring success. Coming from an organization that I think, operates in many countries, depending on the country we're in, we have a slightly different scorecard for helping us measure whether we're making progress or not. Sometimes it's along the lines of digital inclusion. Sometimes it's trying to figure out where Indonesia is on the Digital Readiness Index. It's not always about ROI, ROE, because we're here for the long term. And I think between the three, that's a little bit how I think sometimes companies can navigate to be resilient in the long term in complex markets.
All right. My very quick question, again, to all the panelists. How do you measure ROI? I mean, your investment should translate to more than just papers, but also real growth, smart growth that really brings and elevates people's lives and livelihoods. In very short sentence, how do you measure ROI?
For us, we're measuring how much cash gets moved to digital payments. Very simple.
Hans?
Is the amount of trust and belief that we get from the different stakeholders in Indonesia.
Tian Chong.
For the AI initiative I'm working on with my team, the way we look at it, there are actually three broad measures. ROI, for the EBIT uplift short term. There's also a return on employee, ROE, because we want productivity. But more importantly is the third one, which is ROF, which is the return on the future. Because there are some strategic choices we're making in our AI investment, which doesn't have a short-term payoff, but fundamentally we have some transformation, a needle-moving transformation that we want to do. For example, in autonomous network, where we have the vision of configuring a self-configure, self-optimization, self-healing network around the radio antenna network, RAN, for the 5G. These are ROF topic as well, where it is more difficult and complex, but it's needle moving.
All right, nobody has the crystal ball to look into the future, but you did mention about the industry outlook for this year. There's some consolidation happening in the telco industry in the region. Are you able to share that to the audience?
Well, there's no secret there, but Singapore, for example, where I'm from, it's been announced that 4 players, we have 4 telcos in Singapore for 6 million people or less. It's really hyper-competitive and overcrowded. 4 is becoming 3. And from Singtel perspective, we look forward to that. So, it's a good thing.
Very bullish. Hans, in your efforts to enrich the lives of your partners, your merchants, SMEs, and also driver partners, how do you see your investment translating into real growth?
I think because again, we are a micro player, right? When I hear Khazanah has 40 billion in assets, we have less than 1% of that. And so I think what we are trying to think about in terms of payoff on our investments is that on one hand, we need to make sure that, of course, the P&L does well. But I think on the other hand is we need to invest in real technologies that actually make a huge difference. One example is credit scoring. And you say, okay, credit scoring, okay, lending business, right? Yes, but also bear in mind that, again, based on Bank of Indonesia statistics, 100 million Indonesians are either unbanked, and whoever is banked, a significant portion of that are underbanked, right? So what is it that we can do to make sure that we can provide funding to this segment of the population? That involves collection of data, that involves streaming and cleaning up of data, that involves algorithms to convert it into some sort of credit scoring, and that also involves some capability to work with our funding partners. So I think some of these investments can become core capabilities that is value accretive not only to the company, but also to avail a new service or a new capability to a lot of consumers and customers who may not have that before.
Aileen, credit scoring. Is this something you'd like to comment on?
Well, interestingly, we do quite a lot of work in terms of how data informs for whether someone would be good to take a loan and how much we should be able to give. So it's a very exciting space, and I think we see a lot of that actually happening in Indonesia.
All right. So we know that Indonesia aims to celebrate its 100th year anniversary in 2045. So that's about 20 years from now. Indonesia Emas 2045. What would be the one thing you'd like to see accelerated in 20 years from now?
It might be impossible, but I'd love to see the digital economy accelerate even faster. So we get through, I think, the hurdles that we are having around cybersecurity, cybercrime, digital identity verification. There is a lot of that. But I do think, and I say this a lot, Indonesia maju, digital siap. I think as we get ready with that infrastructure, we are going to go towards that much faster than I think we thought possible.
Digital infrastructure. Hans, what would you like to see being accelerated to reach that golden goal?
I think talent development. I think talent. Of course, I'm biased. Talent in STEM. And I think there's a lot more that we can do. And this is an area where an acceleration will have very, very big multiplication effect throughout the entire economy.
Digital infrastructure, talent, Tian Chong.
Yes, I think I agree with Hans. I spoke a lot about workforce transformation, reskilling, job redesigns. I think 20 years from now, fundamentally, organizations will look vastly different from today, you know, with AI in play, all of that. So I agree. You know, we need to now start working on that talent pipeline and start preparing, you know, for a bright future, especially Indonesia. We have a very young demographic and lots of promising talent here.
Yes, I mean, everyone feels young when they come to Indonesia, right?
Indeed.
Surrounded by young people, young population, very promising
I was going to say
Gen Zs and the future generation of leaders. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this really brings us to the end of our session today, CNA Summit 2025, with a panel discussion. I'd like to just summarize just a little bit of what we've talked about. It's very interesting how we look ahead, not just this year, but 20 years from now, how advantage actually gets built, how smart growth, innovation, and investment can actually translate to smart and real growth. So ladies and gentlemen, please do acknowledge my panelists. We have Ng Tian Chong from Singtel, Hans from GoTo, and Aileen Goh, and give them a big, big, warm round of applause. We shall rise. And we would love to continue our discussions over lunch. We know that everyone's tummy is grumbling already. But yeah, let's return to our seats and enjoy our lunch.
Was there to wrap up the CNA Summit 2026. That was the final item on stage. You can still hear the applause happening from the ballroom. Olivia Marzuki there doing a wonderful job marshalling Hans, Aileen, and Tian Chong on stage. Did you enjoy that conversation? It was pretty lively, wasn't it?
Exactly, Yasmin. They have thought about many things from telco industry, from scam also. Tech industry. Hans has spoken very eloquently about the challenges that he has now. Of course, he's pretty new to the role. And Aileen also very eloquent about how the credit card industry moving around in this region.
Yeah, that's right. She talked a lot about regulation as well here in Indonesia and the importance of being resilient, right?
Exactly.
As you handle regulations that may not stay actually on the landscape. And then there was this big conversation about AI. Earlier we had Tian Chong already, the CEO of Singtel Singapore, on this YouTube live stream with us. And he talked about how they have to keep up with the scammers, and they're doing a really, really good job with that. But still, I mean, it's a whole element to keep it up. But he talked about how that's changing the workforce, and they're preparing for the next generation when a manager might have 100 bots reporting to him or her.
Yeah, I think that's a very critical issue now, not only in Singapore, which is we have quite a number of scam cases, but also in Indonesia, where the scam is even more sophisticated, because it's a big country. And I think they have taken a pretty good steps for all these companies on how to fight these scams, because this is a very serious issue, and we want to make sure that people don't get, we use the word, don't get fooled by all these scammers.
Yeah, okay. Well, the conversations have really been flowing here at the CNA Summit 2023. You can hear laughter in the background. That's because I think it's just a very jovial atmosphere here as we wrap up today, a whole day of conversations in Jakarta, Indonesia. Oh, our first time out of Singapore, which has been great.
Yeah, we are really great to host this in Jakarta, the first time CNA, and we are looking for sure for another one in Jakarta, maybe next year.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. Thank you. That's an invitation, Ericsson. CNA Summit Smart Growth, Navigating Investment and Innovation in a New Era. Listen, we're going to be clipping out the best parts of all the conversations that you have heard today on stage. And if you miss them, you want to revisit them, tune into CNA 17th and 18th February. That's actually over Chinese New Year, so that means that you might be able to take a break from pineapple tarts. 17th and 18th of February, 6 to 7 p.m. Indonesia time, available at cna.asia/YouTube Live. And the whole recording of this YouTube broadcast today will live on for a very long time on cna.asia as well.
I'm Ericsson.
My name's Yasmin Yonkers. Have a great afternoon. Thank you for joining us from Jakarta. Ericsson, we have the whole set here, proudly built by the wonderful people here at the Ritz-Carlton and our event provider. It's been a wonderful time. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time.